Welcome, mate. So I'm just going to refer to you as Nix Bitcoin Dev. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. There was actually some confusion initially because I picked the name Nix Bitcoin on GitHub. So I think some people were confused and thought that my developer account was the actual project. So just to be clear, this is Nix Bitcoin Dev, and I'm just one of the developers, and I'm not in charge or the project itself.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, this will be my sort of first time it's been a completely anonymous person. I have no idea about. This should be quite interesting to hear your story and how you got into it. So I came across you guys because, well, I was looking for to set up a Lightning node, and I went through all the different stuff, and the Nix Bitcoin project came up, and I thought, oh, great, this is wonderful. You know, some dudes have wrapped all of this stuff up in Nix. I thought this is going to be super easy for me, given that I'm a Nix user. And dude, it was painless. It was super easy. And
wow, that's great to hear. That's the first time I hear that, because I'm always agonizing over the fact that it might be difficult to deploy for people. So hearing that from a Nix user is, wow, that's the first time that's something special.
No. I mean, it was like the standard like configuration style thing, and then just Nix OS rebuild, and you're away. It was just everything set up in a couple of days. Downloaded the Bitcoin blockchain, and everything was just working. So and then recently you guys tweeted you replaced the sudo command with what's it?
Do as.
Do as. That's the one. Do as. This is the Open BSD, the BSD variant of sudo. And you listed a couple of reasons for doing this. And when I saw those reasons, I was like, okay, all right, these guys are interesting. I want to hear what they have to say. And that's when I sort of reached out to you guys. And I thought, it would be great to hear your story, how the project came about. Maybe you can tell us a bit about the members in your team. As much as and you can give us as much detail about yourself as you want to. So
starting with do as, since that was your jumping off point. I used to be an Open BSD user, and I really liked its approach to just doing everything Unix style and minimal and very audited packages, but that comes with a lot of trade-offs. One of those trade-offs is you have a very limited set of packages available. The other one is that it's not as far developed in terms of systems management as Nix OS. And I'd also say that it's much less performant even than the hardened variants of Linux, which we use. So that's how I kind of transitioned into Nix. And I started on the Nix Bitcoin project because it just immediately caught my attention. And I didn't know anything about Nix really at that point, but I thought that this is the ideal way to do a Bitcoin node, a dedicated device, to have basically nothing on it except what you absolutely need for your specific deployment. And that's how I got into Nix OS through this project. And I was always somebody who was interested in security and privacy from, I think, always. And just when I started applying that to computers, that led me on a path to becoming more and more paranoid, I'd say, and more specific about the tools I use. And I think that I'm somewhat the driving force behind the paranoia in Nix Bitcoin. And Jonas Nick, who is works at Blockstream as a researcher, really has a very deep understanding of the technical details. So, a perfect example of a time when my paranoia and his knowledge really helped each other was I wanted to set up the node to use only the Tor network by default. It's called only net onion. And Jonas said, that's very dumb and that can lead to consensus failures. And we actually saw that a couple of weeks ago when the Tor directory servers went down. Yeah. So that would have killed all the Nix Bitcoin nodes. So my paranoia and his Bitcoin knowledge are a very good pair. And then we also are very happy to have Eric on our team, who might be the most knowledgeable person of NixOS on the face of the earth at this point in time. I mean, he knows everything, and has a great attention to detail. And I've learned so many things from him about how to actually develop programs and how to comment and do fix-ups and all these things. So I think that's the core team, which is very loosely kind of came together. And then we also always have flyby contributors who just set up a node, notice something's missing, and contribute. So that's basically my personal story, as much as I can go into detail, and the way that Nix Bitcoin works on a human level. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So would you even hesitate to guess that Eric's knowledge exceeds that of Dolstra?
I think maybe, because Elko is, wow, what a hacker. He might be the quintessential Dutch hacker, but still, I think that Eric has poured so many hours into reading all the source code manuals that he has of the application of NixOS has an extremely deep knowledge. So very glad to have this team. And it's kind of amazing how sometimes in open source, just perfect teams come together without, a human resources department or headhunters or any of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, like when I was going through the code, I was like, God damn it, this is some good, clean code. It's rare to find this sort of, this kind of stuff. And I thought, okay, I got to meet these guys. I got to chat to these guys.
Yeah, but I don't like this approach that a lot of people, especially in our space of Bitcoin node projects, have of like, oh, we'll make a shiny GUI and everything, and then later we'll get into, hardening the system. You will never do that. You've accrued so much tech debt at that point that you'll never go back. So we don't spend time. We don't spend time with that kind of stuff. We want to go and write good code that, we feel comfortable deploying Lightning nodes on, which is your use case as well, which really depends on security because it's a hot wallet on a live internet connected machine. So you want to be careful.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And like, well, I want to go into those sorts of questions, like, for example, a little bit later, but like, for example, how you guys, what's your attitude about backwards compatibility, etc. We'll go into that a little bit later. But I think it would also be good to go into, because there will be a group of users that might not necessarily know the level of technical detail we're talking about rather fluently. You see what I mean? So it might be good to outline these core technologies. For example, what Nix is, etc. These sorts of things. So maybe you want to go about saying what Nix is, and then why it's a really good why it's a really good like a foundation for running something like Bitcoin and Lightning nodes.
So Nix is a novel approach to package management. It's a novel package manager that doesn't work with downloading binaries or, all this usual mess. I can't really describe exactly how the usual package managers work, but it's there's a lot of exactly. There's a lot of relative references and all this stuff. So Nix throws that out and just goes straight to the source code and uses hashes to reference everything. So it doesn't deal with versions or anything. Just goes with unique paths, and it'll just pull in for every package exactly the other packages it needs. So you can have, one package that uses a GUI and one that doesn't, and one that uses Firefox with Wayland and the other with X11. And, every possible configuration, older libraries, newer libraries, is possible and clean. And that's, I think, once you've gone there, it's the only way to do Linux package management.
So one way I like to look at it is that Nix doesn't do upgrading of package management. It basically moves from one snapshot of a configuration of a package universe to the next snapshot of a package universe, and back. That's really, really important.
Yeah,
I remember the first time I installed Nix, and after years of you want to run maybe for example apt-get, and then your entire configuration gets completely fucked up, and you're like, oh god damn it, I have to go repair this stuff, or Debian or something like that, and you're so hesitant about upgrading the system. And then I remember I went to Nix and I made a configuration change. It broke, and I remember thinking, oh God, how am I going to fix this now? And it just rebooted, and there was an atomic rollback, and I'm like, oh my word, this is the best.
Yeah. So, and what you can use the Nix package manager standalone on any Linux system, but when it gets really interesting is when you use NixOS, which builds an entire operating system around Nix and that approach.
Yeah. Some people complain about systemd, but actually, if you're interfacing with systemd via Nix, kind of
systemd is one of the gripes. I mean, of course, we're all romantic about the Unix philosophy, but it's systemd does a lot of very useful things. So, a lot of the security stuff we do is just systemd options. So basically, you can confine root access in a service, which saved us one time already when the sudo bug happened. None of our services could gain privilege because they're in a systemd sandbox where they can't. There's a systemd option set where it actually can't get more privileges than it started with. So and a lot of the security stuff works with systemd. A lot of another cool thing is that something people have been agonizing and trying to do for many years, which is system call filtering. Systemd implements that perfectly. So you can say, this little lightning process shouldn't be able to restart the system, and all that, just limit the amount of calls it can make, and all this stuff systemd makes very easy. So I'm split. I see both sides of the argument, but that's just how it is. I mean, we have to, NixOS uses it, and we have no real choice because we would have to write all the modules ourselves if we wanted to use Runit or an alternative. So that's where we're at. I don't think it's the biggest issue security-wise we face, and also not the biggest issue functionality-wise. So I think it's okay.
Okay, so from your perspective, this makes it a rather ideal environment to be able to create a bed for running something like a high security node, like a Bitcoin or a Lightning node on, because you're able to have this reproducible fine grained configuration control over like permissions and securities and stuff like that.
Exactly. And the way, that if we were trying to do this, let's say with a normal Linux distribution, I won't even go into OpenBSD, but with a normal Linux distribution, we would have to either write a huge shell script or Ansible script or, that junk, and then just set everything manually, and then every time, and just all these very deep configurations. And with NixOS, we just write some modules and the user can actually say, yeah, I want this. No, I don't want that. And then I want it now. I don't, for example, the best example for this is network namespaces, which is a very deep thing it goes all the way to the Linux kernel. And we just, we have an option to run every service in its own network universe. So when it runs a network scan, it'll only see itself.
Oh,
and the service, like let's say Spark Wallet needs Lightning. So it'll see that network port, those ports at another local, link local address. So, but it won't see Bitcoin D because it doesn't have to. And I think that a lot can be won in security just by following the most basic principles, like the principle of least privilege. And you don't need to go like into crazy, mitigations if you get those basics right.
So let's probably start to go through each one of these different things. How did you approach? What mindset did you use in approaching this? Did you found this project? Did you found it?
No, it was Jonas, and the story is that he just was experimenting with NixOS, I think, and he just put something online, and then I saw it, and more people saw it, and it just kind of organically grew from there. I think if you take a look at the first init commit, it's laughable compared to what it is now, and I've been thinking about that a lot. Software organic growth is good, but I think like there needs to be a set finish goal at some point, and you need to kind of asymptotically get closer and closer to that, and not keep on expanding the feature set. So that's something I've been thinking of, and we've been thinking of, is like where's the end goal for this core project, and how do we stabilize around that? So maybe we can talk about that later too. But that's something fundamental, and also that nobody does. Every software project, or not every, but the majority just says, we keep on expanding, more features, better, like just keep on growing. But there should be a finish line, and when you reach that, there should only be bug fixes, stability improvements, and security improvements and performance stuff, and not nothing else. And that's where I think we want to get to.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult, especially in this field where, for example, like who's to say Lightning is going to be who's to say that Lightning is going to be the nexus point where commerce gravitates towards? Do you see what I mean? It could be another Lightning hash time lock contract system.
Of course.
So yeah.
And that, first of all, I did listen to your podcast with Fluffy Pony, and it was very good. And I heard in that you were kind of skeptical about Lightning, and happy to hear that you've tried it. I think that Lightning is very good, but of course it's not the end of it all. And it might not be, maybe it is, but it might not be. And of course we would adapt, but I think the idea is to make a very stable and minimal base system, and then make it very easy to extend it, maybe in another repo or in the same one, but just getting a core feature set and making everything plug into that, and completely stabilizing that core feature set.
That's not actually a bad idea. So you become like a Nix packages with flakes.
Yeah, flakes is an idea on that, or is a solution on that path.
Maybe you want to explain what Flakes is first.
I couldn't explain it because I haven't looked into it so deeply yet. I think.
Okay, well then maybe I'll explain it. So Elko came out to Hong Kong for about a week or two, and I remember taking him around Hong Kong, brought him to the lab and whatnot. And at that time, he was like, "Yeah, Target, the company, the big supermarket chain in America. They contracted his company, that his organization that he's working for, to develop the concept of Flakes. And Flakes is supposed to be a kind of like the It's strange that Nix is a package management system, yet does not actually have any like language level features to allow modular includes into the language itself. So Flakes was supposed to be the answer to this, and this is the reason why Nix packages is one massive, like it's a monolith code base. So Flakes is supposed to be the answer to being able to have like modules in the Nix expression language.
So how would that look like? So a program would basically pull in, or not a program, but let's say I'm a Target and I'm trying to deploy, let's say, a load balancer for my online store. So I could, plug into the basic flake and then use other flakes, my own other flakes, or some custom, third-party flakes.
Yeah, so I had a little bit of a discussion with Elko about this, and I was I'm not too much in flavor on the flake implementation that's come out so far. I've tried to use it, but I was like, nah, I won't do it. I won't go. I'll just stick with the overlays for now. But the idea is that you have a separate repository, and you just stick a flake.nix file, and there are certain attributes inside there that you would list. For example, like the typical stuff like the author, the version, the name. But this is where it starts to get a little bit maybe iffy for me, is that it reverts back to the SO name, the SO name, all capitalized, which or the semantic versioning, which I personally think is a horrendous nightmare. Personally, it uses semantic versioning in that sense. So you would give a list of certain versions which would be compatible, and then it would be in that repository would then be compiled according to the specifications defined in the flake and then brought in. As I said, I'm not sure on that, and probably maybe you would even go with overlays if you wanted to go in this direction.
And the package, these flakes, are they natively cryptographically signed?
Yeah, not sure. But you would need to do that.
So that's actually the biggest thing that I'm thinking about with Nix, or that gives me kind of nightmares, is that nothing is signed. Yeah. Basically, nothing is signed, or there's no public key infrastructure. There's really nothing. Like, that's the only strength that OpenBSD, well, not the only one, but let's say the biggest one that I see is that OpenBSD uses a very simple tool called Signify, and there's a small set of developers who are, I think, very knowledgeable and trustworthy, and everything basically is cryptographically signed. And even with Debian, they sign stuff. Of course, only signing is not a silver bullet, but I think combined with the way that NixOS works in general, it could be very cool to make multi-signed releases and define exactly how many people you trust, and this would be a huge security improvement. And back in the day, people said, when I used to bring this up, that these supply chain attacks, of course, I've heard about them in theory, but they've never happened in practice. And that has changed in the last few months. I think 2 or 3 Bitcoin businesses have been attacked in terms of money was attempted to be stolen, and in some cases actually stolen through supply chain attacks. And even with the SolarWinds or whatever, that business management software was also a supply chain attack. And I mean, that's a huge company. So that's not exactly an open source NPM, some joke, package management system. But this is the next, frontier is supply chain attacks. And it would be very cool to see that really mitigated in NixOS, which of course would be easier if the base repository of NixOS wasn't as huge as it is.
Come on. All right. Okay. So that's the second bit there. Okay, so I'll do some editing. Yeah. So it's my power cable. It needs to be replaced tomorrow. I'm going to Sham Shui Po to replace it.
So the last thing you heard was the last thing I said was that it would be easier to do supply chain integrity if the NixOS
that's right.
base repo was not as big as it is.
Yeah. The issue. I think I would be in a similar sort of torment as you are, trying to have a chain of a provenance or trust about the packages that get linked in. I think it would probably be better not to have a kind of a flake, just keep it core, basically. Just keep the core.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, and then in that way you're very sure about what actually is in the Nix Bitcoin project, and it doesn't sort of branch out into other things. So you just keep it minimal.
We don't need most of the packages inside the NixOS Nix packages repo. We only use basically the most core features. So Flakes is something that's definitely going in the right direction. But let's see. I mean, the thing that we have right now works, and I think it's already better than most other solutions out there. And talking about other Linux distributions, I mean, just because things are signed doesn't mean the person who's signing them is keeping their keys well, or is reviewing code actually, or it's not compromised himself as an individual, as a human being. So, and I think in Debian even keys are kept on hot build machines. So it's all a mess, a big mess. And I think NixOS is actually one of the projects that's most likely to fix it. And I also don't want to go back to the OpenBSD approach, which is that of a very small subset of packages and functionality, and it's kind of stayed back in time a little bit with also a lot of security features. So it's one of the risks, but you can't insure against everything, and I think that we're already very far in most aspects.
The security thing is I mean, since we've had these large sort of package repository type things, it's no longer, well, there is the security threat of running, code which is not derived from within your system, external code. Now an attack vector is to sneak stuff into the package chain, right? Into your dependencies, so that you just download them, signed or not, and execute them, and whoops, Yeah, so that's a real threat.
But we talk about security a lot because I guess that's my side or my approach to the project. But another very cool thing, which again was something where I said, "Wow, so happy we're building on NixOS," is that recently Bitcoin added I2P support in its in the master branch, and it's going to be out with the next release. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make one option, bitcoin.i2p equals true, and if that's set, then we configure everything. We configure the I2P service, its options, and the way it links into the the Bitcoin service, and doing that on a traditional system, it would be a bigger pain, and so a nightmare. So I'm very excited about that, and I2P. I don't know. You Fractalide, your project is also a kind of I wouldn't say darknet, but a new approach to networking. So
dude, it's totally a darknet, bro. It's totally a darknet.
So can you tell me about that, and also maybe about what your thoughts are on I2P and Tor, but both, but more I2P, since you most probably have a lot of experience in the field.
Well, regarding I2P, no, I don't have that much experience and knowledge in it. It's just I even though I built a networking protocol, so I don't want to comment on that. It's probably, you know what? Probably I might get an Indaba with the programmers behind I2P, and then see what they have to say. Let them speak for themselves, damn it.
Yeah.
But yeah, at least the protocol that I've created was basically so we're getting like some clinkling going on there with the audio.
That's me.
Okay.
It won't be on my recording. Don't worry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a response. It's basically anger-driven development. I've looked at the state of networking and security, and it's just me just raging. And you know, I want to have a chain of provenance. I want every chunk of data that's out there on the internet, on this protocol, this internet that I'm doing, that is signed. It's optionally encrypted. It's, you know, and it has the semantics which are most closely related to human beings. And fundamentally, I'm removing an indirection. So, for example, we have a problem at the moment in the sense that most of our data of relevance, you could say, well, I mean, not of relevance, it's most of our data, I could say popular data, goes through servers like Google servers, Amazon servers, Facebook servers, Twitter services. They're monoliths, basically, and they control your data. So if they don't like your political stance, they will deplatform you. And I'm very much you could say a libertarian, and I appreciate free speech. So for me, free speech is a fundamental to human thinking. It's important to use free speech to be able to solve like problems, how to gravitate towards like a natural, the most accurate understanding of the natural world around us. You need to have free speech to do that. Yeah, see, you don't want to be in the scientific body and fear saying something because the government will shut you down. Basically, you see what I mean. So you want to be able to speak truth to power, basically, and not fear for a bullet in your head.
Yeah, of course, and it's not only that nowadays. It's the entire social context of saying something actually controversial, and I think that it's very difficult to deal with for normal people because they're between these two sides. This is what I think. They're between the mainstream dogma, which is definitely false in many, if not most aspects, and then they're also on the other side with these people that are just contrarian by nature, and anything that is not mainstream is right. So, and sometimes even they contradict themselves in their position. So I think that we really need to, first of all, of course, the government is the biggest threat always. But what's important for us, as in, not us as a society. I don't like when people say that us. That's usually covert slang for collectivism. But I'm saying us as in the people listening here. We need to change our own head and say everything is okay to be said, but please bring the evidence. Evidence is the deciding factor. So I'll listen to any crazy idea, and I encourage people to have crazy ideas. Some of the biggest medical breakthroughs were crazy ideas. For example, germ theory. The people that Semmelweis, who came up with it, was driven insane. So by his colleagues. So any crazy ideas have been great for humanity. But please, bring evidence, and we, as in the listeners here, need to check evidence and know how to evaluate it ourselves, and then we can distance ourselves from this entire society of trying to stop speech. And we can also not, revert into this other authoritarian way of thinking, which is that everything that's not mainstream is good. So, and in terms of networking, it's a huge problem. But at the end of the day, these companies, I think it's just a natural process now that the big companies are, it used to be that the bigger they were, the more profitable it is. But I think that they're slowly running into scaling issues on a societal level. And it's actually maybe a good thing that they're starting to censor people so that there'll be a possibility for alternative private competitors. And as long as the government doesn't get involved, I think things will kind of sort themselves out a little bit. But the governments are already involved. So if you look at ICANN, that's, in America, if ICANN doesn't like you, then okay. Good luck being a domain registrar. So
as with the founder of the Pirate Bay, right?
Yes, he has this great domain service called Nyala, and they've just refused to give him an accreditation as a domain registrar, which I can understand because he's been a big pain for the United States government. But we shouldn't. The world shouldn't work this way, and that's, I think, where you loop back to Bitcoin and one of its biggest strengths. It's not controlled by any one country. And it's actually it's very interesting that, the countries that would most benefit from Bitcoin are very hesitant at the moment, like Iran and Russia and other countries. And I think that, of course, most of these countries are very, are not peaceful at all, and then deserve, they deserve to be outside the community, the global community a little bit. But I don't think that the alternative of having this, one force controlling the world is good. So it's a positive thing globally that things get decentralized, and Bitcoin is one step, and changing the way that networking works also, because the internet is becoming critical infrastructure, or of course already is. So it's critical, this kind of thinking and these new approaches.
So yes, in the sense that you said that, like, these mega, well, I call them data dissemination monopolies. That would be Amazon, Twitter, etc. Yes, it is natural. It is a natural byproduct. It's like an emergent property that you will get data dissemination monopolies when you do a data dissemination over a point-to-point communication system, as is TCP/IP. So there's no two ways around it.
You think that it's inherent in the?
It's inherent to the network. In my understanding, it's inherent. It's a natural cause and effect. It's an emergent property. So the reason for that is because there's an indirection. To get your data, you need to go to a domain name, which gets translated into an IP address. That IP address is what is referred to as the narrow waist of the networking stack. So on the application side of the networking stack, the applications see the IP address, and then on the stack of the networking, where the parts of the networking stack that actually move the bits, they also see IP addresses. So it's like the middle point. So what the networking protocol that I'm creating essentially shifts the narrow waist away from IP address to the actual name of the data. So this means that just by issuing a request for the data by name, that's all that's needed to get the data. So the network will see the name and say, oh, okay, I'll go find it for you, and then bring it back to you. So basically, data can be in any node, data essentially doesn't have a home. Whereas in the network that we have at the moment, data does have does have a home, and
So
it's behind an IP address.
Is it like IPFS where data is fractured across a large data store?
Kinda, yeah. Except I don't like IPFS because it uses a hash for the name, which is not a natural. Humans don't talk in hashes. Humans talk in natural language, you see? So it just makes sense to make the name of the data to be the natural thing for you to go out and get the data. Like that's basically it. So nowadays we use this REST stuff, which is like, www.domain.com/ and then da. So that's essentially kind of like a name, but there's a massive translation, there's a massive indirection, and a lot of expensive plumbing that goes into creating that sort of system for you to be able to do that kind of lookup. You've got your whole DNS system, you've got your translation into IP address, and then you've got all the, if it's a big service like Facebook or something, you've got the massive server farm behind that IP address that's busy looking. And then sometimes you're busy faking IP addresses, and you're doing like handoffs, all sorts of crazy ass stuff that goes on. And the whole thing it's just rent seeking in my mind. It's just rent seeking because all the venture capital runs around that. It's like venture capitalists just give a shit about how many users you've got. You see, they're like, how many users have you captured? Like, yeah, we can sell that data. So to me, it's just like a natural emergent property of using the current networking stack. And we've learned TCP/IP is like 1960s. 1960s. It's freaking old. It's old. So we've learned, that it's time to move on up. So and this is what I'm thinking is that I've started with this networking protocol at this level, and I want to basically move all important data over it, because I've included security into this networking protocol. So this means that anything above it naturally gets this level of security in a very smooth and frictionless way. It's basically part of the networking protocol. So I want to build like something like Lightning or hash time lock contracts on top of this protocol. So this is the kind of like direction I'm looking at. So
if I want to host data on Fractalite, do I put it on my own machines, or is it kind of like Tragedy of the Commons split across the entire network?
No, there's no DLT distributed
hash table.
Yeah. There's nothing. There's no hash table, a distributed hash table like that. No. You can host it on your own machine, or maybe like you can imagine like there would be like services out there on the internet who say, okay, you pay me X Bitcoin, and I will make sure that data that you want is stored locally on that machine, so you can get more availability. But but at the same time, if that particular data is popular, then, as I said, the data essentially has no home. So if it can be copied out onto the internet or onto the nodes, and then wherever it's popular, it will sort of like it'll sort of spread out about there. So if there's a friend, okay, I'm in Hong Kong, a dude in America wants the data. The network takes the data from Hong Kong to America. The dude in America says, yeah, check out this video. That friend will not come all the way to Hong Kong to get the data. He'll just get it from his neighbor. So in that way, the data usage, the bandwidth, remains at a theoretical minimum.
And I read that it can also use different transport technologies like radio.
That's right.
That's very cool, because that's one of the pain points in Bitcoin. That let's say that something happens on a like a natural catastrophe or something, and the network goes down. Yeah, or governments. I don't
like the Arab Spring, right?
I don't always want to be government. But let's say even the government, they are if they turn off the network, which they do, then Bitcoin has a very hard time, and if that happens, even on a larger scale, then there could be network segmentation and consensus failures. So people have been thinking about using satellites and all this stuff, but I think that it would be cool if there was something native on the network layer, if that you could just split across many different communication channels, even like lasers, and people have come up with all kinds of ways, and it's a very cool thing.
So I got a very real, a real experience of this the other day. A mate of mine has got, he's just expanded his lab. So basically, he's got another, like an annex, basically, which is in the next building. So what we did, we ordered 150 meters of armored, military-grade fiber optics cable.
Mm-hmm.
And we pulled this military grade fiber optics. You can imagine Hong Kong cities, like, Hong Kong, these buildings everywhere, right? So we pulled this cable right over the building, and along the top, and then dropped it down and down the side, putting cable ties everywhere, and then just linking the two labs together, because obviously, the only other way is to get another internet contract, and we're like, nah, fuck that.
That's so cool because private networks. That's how the internet used to be. Is that you had all these LANs in universities, and they were connected, and that nowadays those are the only people that are using LANs properly are universities. But that's I think that's so cool to have data close. Even on the, not talking about new network protocols, but using the internet, having data very close to the people, even on, not internet connections. But Bitcoin, because it's such a social technology, it needs consensus across the board. So doing something like that, let's say you want your own private Bitcoin network, and you just set it up with your friends, and you run cables, let's say in the street and over buildings, and you can't link up basically to the bigger chain unless you have like a direct connection. You can also go off and do transactions, completely separately, and then come back. But there's a very interesting protocol called Scrit. I don't know if you've heard about it. That uses Bitcoin or other stores of value as a base layer, and then it builds on top of that an eCash system, which might be the most small scale approach to digital money you can have, with a central mint or a federated mint, and then just users have to connect to that when they transfer funds. Sometimes even not. You can do cool stuff with pre-signing, so you can do offline transactions. But just it would be cool to build these kinds of things on top of Bitcoin, especially for resiliency. And as you said in the beginning, and maybe I can ask you also to further explain your hesitation about Lightning. But Lightning, I think, is not the final solution when it comes to resiliency. It has a lot of benefits, but that is not. I haven't seen it to be a strong side yet. So, just to you, I'm wondering what your reservations about Lightning are.
So at the time, actually, it was instigated by the Indaba I had with Fluffy Pony to take it more seriously. You need to. Please recognize that I went into that Indaba with not that much knowledge of Lightning, and since that Indaba, I've done quite a lot of research into the area, and I've even made a little bit of a foray into implementing Lightning on top of Copernica, the networking protocol I'm talking about, which has actually sent me down one massive rat hole, man. I'm telling you, this is how serious a rat hole I'm in at the moment. If you take a look over here, you see this?
I don't think video is working on my side, but no,
oh really?
Oh no.
Yeah. Oh, isn't it? Okay, so shit, don't you want to? Can't you? Oh, you can't enable video, right?
No, I cannot.
Okay. So you can't see the video stream of me then?
I can't, but it's not a big issue because audio is fine for me. But if you think about,
but what I'm saying is, can you see a picture of me, an
no,
image of me?
Nothing.
Not at all. Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, well. Okay. Well, I'm showing a hardware dongle to you right now. It's basically a hardware dongle which has an STM32 MCU on it, and this is going to be the place where I store the private key, because I'm quite unhappy with having a private key that has to sit there on a Lightning node. That's my main issue I have with this, is that I don't want to have a private key sitting there on the same system.
Wait a second, you're building a hardware wallet for Lightning, or
pretty much, yeah, yeah.
So does it sign everything that you send into it? Because that's
Okay, so this is the architecture at the moment. So everything's going to run on Copernica. So you've got the whole, the security. Like basically, this is a hardware dongle for Copernica, the networking protocol I'm creating. So if you're going to do if data's coming through, if you want to sign or publish some data, or you want to encrypt something for somebody else, then the private key sits on this device, and you can just run the software as is, the Copernica software as is on pretty much maybe even an insecure node. I'm not sure. Obviously, look, ideally, this stuff would be packaged on Nix Bitcoin and deployed that way. But I mean, there's a long road to go. There's a long road to go to even meet that threshold, that bar. But yeah, that's what I mean by the kind of rat hole that I'm going in on, is that I really appreciate this layer 2 stuff. To me, Ricardo Fluffy Pony, he really, that Indaba was it was quite an insightful one. To me, I see that, Bitcoin goes through different phases. There's basically 4 phases. So every monetary system goes through 4 phases. First, it starts off as being like an oddity, a collectible, and then it's something, like oddity, collectible, and then it becomes like a store of value. That's kind of like phase 1. Currently, Bitcoin is phase 1, which is the store of value stuff. Then after this, it becomes a medium of exchange. This is where Bitcoin is going to go. Now, it's impossible for Bitcoin to go to the medium of exchange phase right now with 7 TPS. It's just not possible. So layer 2 will enable that. This is what Lightning does. This is what enables that. And then after that, it becomes a medium of exchange, then a unit of account. No, unit of account is the last one. And then
there's something in between.
Yeah, there's something in between.
Not sure, but I'm not sure either. I've never been, I used to be kind of into this monetary theory stuff, but I'm slowly realizing that, code, it's all code. Like Satoshi probably didn't sit, read Rothbard and then code this, but he just had an idea for a very functional system and something that aligned with his view of reality. So it's not as important as, this theory stuff. I think writing code and building businesses is the actually important activity.
No, I definitely agree with you, but no, I've been rat holing on monetary systems since about 2005. I created a Let's Group, local economic trade system, back in 2005. So this stuff is kind of, it's a bit of a passion of mine, kind of thing. But anyway, so for me, I see Lightning or layer 2 as the mandatory thing. It's just mandatory for Bitcoin to become a medium of exchange, used for selling your daily goods, doing this sort of level of transaction where you can go buy coffee, etc. It's critical for that. And as for it's when that happens, it's just going to leave all the. Then I foresee the layer 1 blockchain would be just purely for setting up and tearing down these multi-sig layer 2 contracts, essentially, as well as to do the optional transaction that you want to move the Bitcoin directly on the base layer. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a hierarchical thing, and then you're going to see like the equivalent of smart contracts on layer 2. It's going to be great. It's going to be really exciting to see. But as I mentioned,
this is how like nature works. You don't scale everything on the base layer.
Yeah,
I couldn't think of an exact example. I know that I thought about something recently where I realized that Bitcoin and most good systems align with the way nature works. And so things don't usually scale.
I have a good example.
Please.
You know the Nautilus. Do you know the Nautilus?
Okay. No.
So the Nautilus is one of the oldest animals under the ocean. It's very, very deep, and basically it's like a shell with a very circular shape, right? So imagine a wheel that starts off small, then it starts to grow and grow and grow and around in a spiral shape, right? Yeah, can you imagine that?
Yes, I can.
So basically, that's what it does. Is it builds a little bit more on top of the previous layer of the spiral, and it grows out, and it grows more, and it grows more, and the spiral gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So yeah, that's your natural example.
Yeah, that's a very good. And also, my example is more from the social realm. Maybe I'll be reminded of it very soon. But I think that things usually grow this way. And one time, something that completely changed my thinking, and I have to admit, maybe back then I was a little bit into altcoins. But something that completely...
That's fine. You're forgiven. I was too.
I need to be forgiven. It's not a good thing. Really, I think that it's...
I agree.
I'll get into why it's not a good thing. Are you still there?
Hashing session. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. So basically, one time I met one of the the most prolific Bitcoin core developers, Matt Corallo, in person, and we talked, and I asked him a very noob question, which I was back then. I asked him, how does Bitcoin scale? And he said this one sentence that completely, clarified my understanding. He said, Bitcoin scales through different trust models, and the base layer has to be the most trusted, and then you can go from there and say, okay, Lightning has a little bit of a different, less trust model, and that's a trade-off. It's trust and performance are a trade-off. Even in the natural world, let's go back to our initial example of package management. If every single package was signed by every single NixOS developer, then that would be a huge performance trade-off, but you'd have a lot of trust. So it's a natural trade-off, and on the base layer, you don't want to make that trade-off to the performance side. But when you go higher and things that don't actually affect the base layer, you can start getting creative. And Lightning is an example of that, and Scrypt is a great example. So I used to see it as a huge issue, the scaling thing, but I think that it's going to grow naturally in the way that it is, and it organically emerged. It can't be copied that easily, and I think it's good if the whole world uses the same money.
It's actually diametrically opposite to the current fiat system. Do you see, in the sense that, like, if you were to be, basically the current fiat system is a very, instead of saying trustless, it's trustful. Do you see what I mean? Like, not anybody can enter those inner circles of fiat money printing. You see what I mean? So you have to be a supposed good actor, and I use air quotes with that, to do the secret handshake to be able to join those inner circles of people who do the fiat printing. And then, but inherently, it doesn't cost anything to do these printing rounds, these what they call quantitative easing. And then, the further out away from the circle that you go, the more the more difficult it sort of gets into to get into that. Do you see what, like in the point of an ATM, which would be the very outskirts of the thing, you'd have to have a card and a PIN number and all that sort of stuff. But whereas in Bitcoin, it's like the center layer is completely trustless. So this means that you can attack the center core Bitcoin like really hardcore. And we've had like 10 years or more than 10 years of the core of Bitcoin being heavily attacked. So in this sense, it's like, Bitcoin can be the replacement for central banks. And then anybody. Yeah.
Just because you said that Bitcoin has been attacked, I'm very positive or optimistic about a lot of the hardcore attacks against Bitcoin, like straight up, let's say, taking power out, cutting networks, killing developers, God forbid. All this stuff, I think Bitcoin is resilient against. But one thing that is like the long-term threat, which also happened to gold, is that slowly people move away from using gold. They use notes, they use representatives, and those get inflated. And then at some point, you just completely lose track of the base money. And I don't know how we can avoid, or how it can be avoided in Bitcoin, because when we go up layers, we do exactly that. And, we can't say, it's forbidden right. to make a reserve, to make fractional reserve eCash mints or layer 2 solutions. We can't enforce that on a network layer. So maybe there has to be social consensus around that. But as you know, the governments and other interests are a multi-millennium perfected system of manipulating social consensus. And so I don't know if social consensus is strong enough. The Bitcoin's feature is that, it's so hard to make changes that the most of the consensus things were done on the initial release. And, it's hard to change that social consensus on the network. And that's actually the reason why Bitcoin still exists. If it were easy to implement changes, then Bitcoin wouldn't exist. So that's the biggest feature, actually, which some people consider a bug, but those people don't understand anything. But how do we prevent, we again, as in the listeners, not we, but
I agree with you.
How is it preventable? Do you have any ideas?
I do have an idea, a slight idea. Okay, it all started with the cypherpunks, the crypto anarchists. These are the guys that keep everybody honest. In the sense that these are the guys that are going to create the systems which allow you to move Bitcoin via networks and means. But real Bitcoin, like via networks and means that can potentially be competitive with, for example, Apple Pay or PayPal. You can imagine Apple Pay, PayPal, Revolut. What will happen is that these guys will allow, and they do that now. Revolut, you can buy Bitcoin, but I believe that you can't take Bitcoin off their system. So you can buy it on this system and you can hold it on this system and you can't take it off the system. How are you supposed to know that those digits that you see there are actually real Bitcoin? You see?
That's the central issue. Yeah.
But this is the thing, you see, because if there's always alternatives, then you can have the equivalent of a bank run. So if everyone wants to be complacent and they want to trade the security for the convenience of easy buy Bitcoin on Revolut, but you don't actually know it's the real Revolut, you got burnt, but then you're going to tell your friends and then everyone won't use Revolut, you see? So
exactly.
Eventually
bank runs are a feature, not a bug.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, no. 1930s all over again.
I'd say it was the only thing that kept it all in check, I guess.
Yeah.
I think that you were saying that these things aren't the real Bitcoin, but please continue.
So I think what will happen is that you're going to have like all these different payment processors like PayPal and Apple Pay, and eventually one of them is going to support Bitcoin, and then as what Michael Saylor says, right? He says, like, this is a killer feature. The killer feature is having the equivalent of a bank account that gives you 200% year over year increase in purchasing power. You see, that's a very good feature, given that the banks don't pay really any interest anymore, right? So so if you're on Revolut or Apple Pay or something like that, then you can purchase Bitcoin, and then eventually, as soon as one of them says, okay, yeah, well, we will allow you to move the Bitcoin off our service, and then onto, the open market, like the open internet. This is basically AOL versus the internet. Do you see what I mean? It's a walled garden, and you're going to see, like, people bitching and complaining that they want to be able to move and get access to the outer internet. Yeah, see, so it'll be a similar sort of thing. I'm not too worried about that, actually. I'm not too worried about that, especially since we're going to have things like Lightning and layer 2 technology, which is in essence moving real Bitcoin. So
I think the key differentiator might be, that's just a theory that I came up with right now, is that it might be okay to have, fractional reserve stuff as mediums of exchange, but as long as everybody actually, has their stores of value, if key management is easy to do securely and everybody stores their own money, then even if you have, fake stuff in circulation, there will always be, this anchoring to the base layer. Because with gold, the key issue was the difficulty of storing gold yourself and transferring it, big amounts. So I think that if the base layer stays intact and we don't go in that direction, in the direction of having custody, people have giving custody even ridiculously to the government. I don't know how that happened, but it might be possible to prevent the exact same thing that happened to gold happening to Bitcoin. Yeah. But I think that you can never count out the creativity and the refinement of the state, the state apparatus. And so I'm very curious, and I don't think that if Bitcoin gets attacked, I don't think the thing that's going to kill it is some hardcore attack, but some long-term soft attack on social consensus.
Yeah, maybe. I think one good way to sort of mitigate this thing is to maybe increase knowledge in the sense of what we're doing now. So I think we can healthily assume that we've lost most of the average audience, non-technical audience, and now we've got pretty much only the technical people, because we've done some real technical stuff. We might sort of encourage folks and even ourselves to sort of like recommend to our families and whatnot that if they are going to buy Bitcoin off these different platforms, maybe like PayPal, Revolut, or something, just mention to them, ensure that they only buy on platforms where they are able to withdraw Bitcoin from that platform. Because my brother bought some Bitcoin on Revolut, and I was like, "You did what? Can you withdraw it? Can you withdraw it?" And he was like, "No, I don't know, but I bought it." I'm like, "Dude, you're like, yeah," I like, "God damn it." Anyway, so
it's ridiculous, but it's the thing is that the world, and God created the world, or the world created itself, however you believe, that there's people of all different kinds of intelligence, and all these people are necessary and important, and I don't think that it's a good approach to completely lose those people. And and they will be very susceptible to this kind of fake information, and these some people, you can't even laugh about it. It's very sad. Some people actually bought Bitcoin Cash thinking it's the actual Bitcoin on a discount. Yeah. So it's very hard to protect the normies. I mean, and it's also not an option, or it is an option, but I don't know if it's the best one to just say, screw these people, like we're doing a new society only with intelligent people, because that's not how God intended it. It's not intended to be only smart people. That's, that wouldn't be a good society. You need all different kinds of people. So I'm not sure how these are societal questions, but we can only do our best to mitigate them on a technical level.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. There's a space for everybody, right? And I don't know. I think, it's like in the sense that exchanges are still listing these shit coins, which is also in itself kind of. But
it's not only shit coins. It's also this, like the problem of storing Bitcoin and all these problems. And I don't know if you can make it that easy that everybody can do it. I'm not sure if that even works.
No, it's true. I mean, it's complicated. Like it's freaking complicated. Like designing this little dongle here is freaking complicated.
Yeah,
and getting it to work and writing the solution. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The usual solution to technical difficulty has just been centralizing and giving trust. So Apple just went in and said, okay, screw this, centralize everything. Everybody completely trusts us. Now we can make it user friendly. But that goes inherently against the principles that secure Bitcoin. So this is the attack. This is the biggest attack here, is the using normies against Bitcoin.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. Look, I think as long as the the cypherpunks, they create decent alternatives for you to be able to move Bitcoin about, do the exchange of value. There will always be that pressure vent. Do you see what I mean? There will always be that alternative. So, even if you're, not so high on the IQ index, you could find a way, maybe even, I suppose it's up to the cypherpunks to make it as usable as possible.
But that was the approach. That was the approach for years, was, this is GPG, like you can do everything with it. Now we just teach people how to use it. And then Signal came along and centralized it all, and it actually works pretty well. But do you want Signal in charge of everything in the world, every communication? No.
Yeah, I don't know. Hey, Signal, like I always get nervous when something like that has become so mainstream, and I'm like, what are the compromises?
Even if it's not compromised now, you're building this central entity that is controlling the most sensitive communications on the globe. Very bad idea.
That's also true. But it's like, where's the federatedness? Why did Moxie say no to the federation? Do you see what I mean? It's like,
I know why, because he wanted to do the Apple thing, where you centralize and in a certain way users trust you. And maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's necessary to human operation, is this kind of trust, but it's something new that is this centralized for people.
So you think Moxie said no to federated communication in Telegram because he wants to keep a good user experience?
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually why why it is where it is now, is that because it was able to rapidly develop. I mean, we have the perfect comparison. XMPP existed at the same time, and it's years behind Signal. So because you can develop quicker, and doing that on a federated system is more difficult. Now the rocket has taken off, but the kind of hidden risks that are being accrued are immense. So XMPP has a future, I think, but it's I don't know if it's just a feature of the way things operate socially that it will always tend towards these things, and that's why you get some people saying, okay, we need to make our own society. But these are big questions. I'm not exactly sure how to solve them, but Bitcoin is successful because it's the most interesting project in that realm of so. And I also remember the example where I was talking about how things grow in layers. If you look at functioning at good legal systems, and few are, but in the theoretical ones, exactly, and the religious ones that actually are functional, like English common law and Jewish religious law, there's a base layer, like the Bible, or in case of the common law, a very limited subset of statutes and legal precedent, and then you slowly grow out from there. And those things that are on top have less trust and less trust and less trust. And you can never go against a previous ruling. It's append only. Once something is accepted by the majority, which is with common law as also with religious law, you can't go back. You can't revert that consensus. And so this is a model for the way Bitcoin is growing and should grow, and that we take from other successful systems of the past.
I agree with you. And it's this sort of going back into this sort of like layer of how can I say, even like law as in LORE. Sorry, I just readjusted my position. Yeah. There's this recent. We're going to go off into the philosophical side of Bitcoin, which I suppose is not such a bad idea.
We can come back to the technical after, but yeah.
No. I mean, I just thought it was quite interesting because recently, like Breedlove and a few of these other guys, the more the sort of like social face of Bitcoin, the guys that create these sort of like podcasts and interfacing with the public via Twitter and other means. They've been approaching Jordan Peterson, who does talk a lot about like sort of natural law and these sorts of things. And I think they're trying to find a common ground between what's going on with Bitcoin and Peterson, like fusing of these similar sorts of what you're talking about, the base sort of layer of things. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see what sort of unravels over there, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, definitely. So we take all this stuff. So getting back to Nix Bitcoin, I think that all these ideas have kind of come together through the work that we do. I mean, of course, you can go endlessly up and then think about these huge ideas. But as I said previously, the most important thing is building businesses and writing code. And Nix Bitcoin is, I think that it's safe to say now, not a business. And it's just a free software project. And that's a very good thing. And it can just stay that way, and it's not fragile. It can just continue existing like this, and it doesn't need to grow at rapid speeds. There's a limited set of functionality at the moment. None of these things that, going back, taking Signal as an example, Moxie gave a talk and he said the reason that he had to centralize is that the ecosystem is moving, which means that we're moving everything's moving all the time, like these GUIs are constantly changing. There's stickers, there's this, GIFs and audio messages, and everything is moving so quickly that even just to keep up and things not to break, you need to have a centralized infrastructure. So with Nix Bitcoin, we're pressing the slow speed button, like the turtle button, and we're saying, okay, like we don't need to do things that will break if we don't maintain them every day with the huge corporate apparatus. So we'd rather, have one of these minimal projects that just grows asymptotically towards a goal and then stays there, and stuff that wants to build on top, no problem.
Yeah. And now you've got a number of different sub-projects in there. For example, like maybe you can go into each one of them. Like, for example, you support multiple instances of Lightning. You've got something called CoinJoin. Do you want to expand on what each of these things are?
So multiple instances of Lightning is kind of a meme, because like it's an example of how NixOS is superior. One more example. Let's add it to the log list. What we can do with our system is, which you can't do with other nodes, is say, I want to run a Lightning and a C Lightning and an LND node side by side. Why not? And all I'm going to do is change one option, which port it's listing on, because obviously they can't bind to the same port. Although with network namespaces, they can, because they're all running in their own namespace where they can bind to the same port. So that's another advantage. But let's assume a normal system without network namespaces, which are optional at the moment. You can just say they bind to two different ports, and you just change the setting of where you don't even need to inform your users, because we use Tor hidden services. So that hidden service will just redirect to the port it's supposed to. So you can choose any port on the Lightning side. So you can even do that with NAT. So it's not really an issue. So what we can do with Nix Bitcoin is make it very easy to run two Lightning nodes side by side, or even you could even run many side by side. So that's a great feature. And in terms of CoinJoin, that's something we've been thinking about, but right now we support Join Market, which is the oldest.
Oh, sorry, Join Market. That's the one. Join Market.
Yeah, Join Market. It does coin joins. It's the oldest variant, and kind of sticking with the philosophy, we like to do use things that have been working for a long time. So that was the initial thing, but Join Market has a lot of trade-offs, and we're thinking about that. I can go way into detail on this, and maybe we should. But yes, maybe it's better to do Wasabi to switch to Wasabi wallet coin joins. So the thing with Join Market.
First of all, explain what these things are, and then.
Sorry, I'm going way too fast here.
No, that's okay. I mean, like, it's my job to slow you down. Hey, it's like, hey, man.
So, coin join, you have this problem in Bitcoin that you have an open ledger. Everybody can see every transaction.
Right.
What you can't see is who owns which address. So what CoinJoin does, or who, as in which natural physical person, in the meat space owns which digital Bitcoin address. So what CoinJoin does is it says, okay, we have this list of funds here on the input side, these addresses which have a balance, unspent balance, and those can be let's say 3, 2, 1, whatever balance you want. It doesn't need to be the same. And we put all of these guys into one transaction. And on the other side, there's a list of equal outputs. So you'll have, let's say, some on the coming inside, you have 3, 4, 5. On the outside, you'll have 1, 1, 1, and for every person, his change. So now those 3 people who went in to the CoinJoin with different balances now all have one balance that could be any of the 3. So that's the entire principle behind CoinJoin.
Right.
And now the question is, how do we coordinate those people, and how do we deal with the change? Those change outputs that somebody who went in with 3 now gets 1 and 2. How do we deal with the 2? Because that's still tied to him through logic, through simple math. So how do we deal with the change, and how do we coordinate people into coin joining? And Join Market goes in with the assumption that the problem with coin joining is not that people are unwilling to do it, but that they are unwilling to do it at the same time. So I want to coin join right now, and the other guy wants to coin join right now in 4 weeks. So how do we coordinate me and him? So it creates an incentive structure to have people be makers that just put on a hot wallet on a server that always runs their funds, and they say, I don't have time preference. I just want my coins to be mixed, but I don't care when I spend them. So this person is a maker. He puts in his funds and makes them available. And when somebody comes in, a taker, he can just come in and say, right now, I want to coin join, and the makers will give him access to their funds to coin join, and they'll get a small fee, and the taker will pay the transaction fees. So it seems very cool, like when you talk about it, and the coordination happens on IRC, which is also very cool because it's an established communication protocol. It's very easy to set up a server. You can connect to servers on Tor, I2P, everything. So it's kind of cool that it has a decentralized messaging infrastructure. But the problem with join market that I'm seeing right now, and I'm realizing this more every day, is that the maker and the taker behave completely differently after the mix. Way? The maker enters new mixes with his funds, and the taker takes them out and spends them. So what you end up having to do is chain many coin joins together on the taker side to
obfuscate it. Yeah.
To obfuscate the different kinds of usage. So there's a script for that, but then you need to do like 8 coin joins, which is not economical. Or what you could do is be a maker yourself, and then, which is what most people do, is they're a maker themselves, and then they just let people coin join with them, and they get a certain amount of coins that have been joined many times, and then they spend those. But what ended up happening, or what's right now the situation with join market, is that pretty much everybody's a maker, and the takers, the suckers who want a coin join right now, are not many. So what ends up happening is that a maker doesn't get many transactions, and if he does, it's very small amounts sometimes. So you get this hodgepodge of outputs in higher mix layers, mix steps they call it. So when things have been mixed many times, you get like this hodgepodge of small outputs, and it's kind of a mess, and it's inefficient. Even from, like, let's say you use it perfectly, then you do end up doing 11 coin joins as or something. And and so Wasabi is different. Wasabi says, we take all these people that want a coin join right now, and they probably use it the same way, and these people we just coordinate into big coin join rounds and they're getting 100 people per round. So and you just do one round maybe, and you expend immediately, but it's very likely that in that mix, there's at least like 10 or 20 people that are also going to do that.
So it's turn-based at regular intervals, and you just sort of wait, and then, So, and even they have this crazy new update called Wabi Sabi that makes it possible to exit with, how I said earlier that everybody has to have one for it to have privacy. So Wabi Sabi, what you can do is unequal outputs. So people can have one, like you have 100 people in the mix, and only a subset of those will have an output of 1. But that's okay. It can coordinate mixes like that, and so you can put in one mix hundreds of transactions, and inside that mix you will definitely have an anonymity set, and the algorithm also optimizes for anonymity set, I think. So you will you'll see the other people in the round, and you'll pick your output in a way that you maximize the anonymity set of the people already in the mix. So it's like, I think this is the better approach. And and when there's this update called signature aggregation, it even gets economical, because what you end up being able to do with some of the updates that are coming to Bitcoin right now is that you instead of doing hundreds of signatures in this coin join, or let's say 100 if you max it out to 100, then you can replace all those signatures with only one, and trustlessly. And so it becomes economical to kind of go together and sign transactions together. And so we get away from this pure privacy angle, and we add that it's just economical. So people will tend towards that. If they can spend coins together, if they can pool fees, why not? So I think that this is going in the right direction, and I'm somewhat skeptical that join market is the way forward. And there's other ideas too with Bitcoin anonymity on the base layer, which are like coin swaps and other stuff, but none of that is supported in Nix Bitcoin right now. So the next layer might be integrating Wasabi, but the problem with Wasabi is that it's a GUI based application,
and they have a not a very functional headless daemon. And we like to be headless. We like to be, not depend on graphical user interfaces. So it's kind of like it's a problem with Wasabi. So
I see.
I don't know if I can really recommend, any of the CoinJoin solutions right now. But if you have some funds to spare and you want to make a little money and just experiment, then Join Market on Nix Bitcoin is cool, because if you're a maker, then you get money. So, and if you have a big rooting node, then you're also making money. So that's an interesting angle of Nix Bitcoin, that you can just passively earn income on trustlessly.
And without mining.
Exactly. Mining is a very interesting field, but I would only suggest getting into it if you are extremely knowledgeable about energy. You have a knowledge of global law and ways things work, and shipping and all. Like, it's the big boys. It's a big boy game, and I don't even think I would count myself as a big boy. So.
and where the cheapest electricity is, etc. And
they're getting creative. Yeah. They're getting creative. I think that they're using excess electricity in most cases that doesn't cost them anything. So,
I think it's going to eventually boil down to that these miners are going to freaking well hire out nuclear scientists and going to build out nuclear reactors, man. It's going to reach that point, man, because it's like the cheapest sort of source of electricity, and
yeah. But right now, they're going into excess electricity. So on gas mining, you have a lot of waste gas, and if you could just burn that and make money, that's what it's being burned anyway. It's being wasted. Yeah. So why not use it for Bitcoin? And you can there's these mining rigs in a container. You can just put the container right there and plug it in and start mining. So containers are very interesting as a general concept, but we don't have to go down that rabbit hole. Containers are basically the entire world infrastructure runs on the container side. So if you put things in a container, then you kind of get out of this meat space restriction of being in one locality. Like in Hong Kong, if the Chinese, God forbid, take over Hong Kong, it's going to be very less fun for hackers, I think.
I think in some senses I fully understand what people are worried about and out here, but generally speaking, when it comes to the CCP, as long as you don't cross the CCP, then you'll be all right. So there's actually, people have generally a lot of freedom out here in China, and the same will go for Hong Kong. But the main thing is you just don't try to undermine the CCP.
That's very interesting. I heard that one time from somebody who does business in China. He said that in many ways, China is more free than the United States and Europe. There's less red tape. There's less social stigmas. There's less, all this regulate. But it's also interesting that you see with this COVID stuff that some of the freest countries in the world are dictatorships, like Belarus. I don't think they've even heard about COVID, and it's a dictatorship, an actual dictatorship, and people are living freely. They're more free than in many European countries who put on their flag democracy, freedom. We're entering a very interesting stage of the world.
Yeah. Well, let's get back. I mean, there's so much ground to cover on the technical side of things. So could you give an overview of what Lightning is and how it works?
So Lightning is a way to make 100,000 Bitcoin transactions into one. That's how I like to think about it. So instead of doing all those stuff on chain, you make a channel and you do all those transactions through the channel, and then you close the channel when you want to, and then all those 100,000 transactions, the end result gets broadcasted onto the chain. So it's an ingenious system, and if you want a real world example, it works kind of the way that a bar tab works. So when you go to a bar, like most good bars, they don't, ask you to pay immediately. You put it on the tab for a month, and then you just pay it all in one. So, but imagine that tab that you have with your bar, you can also pay Target with that tab. That's the way that's the quantum leap that Lightning makes. There was always this kind of concept of tabs and channels on Bitcoin, but what Lightning does is it makes a way to federate that, and one tab I have with one person can be used anywhere on the Lightning network, as long as there's capacity across your root. And it gets so interesting that you can take one transaction. Let's say I want to do a unit 100 transaction of the value 100, and I have, let's say, 5 channels who each have 30 units in them. I can split that transaction across the 5 channels, and that's great for privacy, and it's great for resiliency. And the Lightning, you can go endlessly into it. You can just make it more functional and it never affects the base layer. That's something beautiful. And also, to talk about hardware wallets on Lightning, I just was reminded of that. Like a friend of mine, Jonas, he came up with a concept, and I think his brother has Konstantin. He has a company, and I think they use this model. So you don't really need a hardware wallet on Lightning if you set up channels interestingly. It's like kind of a hacky way of doing
expand.
Hardware wallet.
You need to expand.
You have, let's say you have one, you have a wallet. So you keep your off-chain keys in a hardware wallet, first of all. That's step one. And then you open a channel, which is on-chain. You sign that transaction with your hardware wallet, and you open a channel to exactly one node. And that is your own node, which is is kind of you put in front of it. And that node has many channels to many people. Okay. But all your funds, all your capacity, with that node, you only have outgoing capacity. And other people connect into your regulator node, your second node. Other people go in, so there's never any capacity on that online node, let's say. And so the from the secure node, I'll say, to your gateway node, to your regulator node, you have a limited capacity size, which is determined by the off-chain signed transaction. Okay. So it's the on-chain signed transaction with your hardware wallet. So you only let's say you set up 100 capacity. You sign that on your hardware wallet, and then you can only ever take 100 out of that node.
Okay, I tell you what. Let me try repeat this.
Yes, it's a very complicated setup, but it's very simple at the same time.
But let me try repeat it, and then you tell me where I'm going to go wrong, because I think I might have missed something. Okay, so I've got 2 nodes. One node is going to be not exposed to the public, and I'm going to have another node which is going to be peering or creating channels with n amount of channels to different nodes. Correct?
Correct.
So far. Okay. Now I'm going to take my we'll call it inner node and the external node. I'm going to my inner node. I'm going to have a single 2-way channel connecting to my external node. Correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to have my internal node. I'm going to take maybe 100 Bitcoin. I'm going to sign it. Stick it on my internal node. And then traffic. Okay, so far.
And then, but let's not say 100 Bitcoin. Let's say 100 Satoshis to make it ridiculous. So and then when you exceed 100 Satoshis going out, it's like a flow control. You need to make another on-chain transaction to open another bigger channel.
With my from my internal to my external.
Exactly. Okay. So you set up these channels which are limited in size. So even if that
so once
node
they get
was
exhausted,
hacked,
right?
once they get exhausted, that's basically like a cold store. Let's think of it
you just
like
throw them away. Is that what you're
you
saying?
just that if that channel gets exhausted, then an attacker can't steal more. You see?
I see.
So I don't know. I hope your listeners were also able to follow. So I'll repeat again.
Okay.
Internal node. I like that nomenclature. Internal node connects via one limited size channel to the external node, which does peering. And limited size channel is a fixed limit on how much funds you can send out without having to make a new on-chain transaction signed with your hardware wallet by a human being. So human being with his business logic in his head makes new channels, and you only can ever lose as much as is in that one limited size channel at a given moment.
Okay.
So it's a very simple and easy way of making a Bitcoin, like making Lightning secure for businesses.
Now another question I have. So when I set up a channel, this requires a multi-signature thing, a contract on chain, correct?
Yeah.
So I would set up from my external node connecting to the external world. I would then set up a series of channels whereby the initial balance I create with each one of these peers will be 0.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
That's correct. So
okay, so
let's think of it more as they're connecting into me. So let's say you have no funds on the external node. You can just ask, let's say your buddy with another business to make a channel into you. So he'll open a channel, and you'll have by that way you have outbound capacity. So let me think how this actually works. So
when he connects to you, does he connect to your external node or internal?
He connects to your external node.
Always the external.
And that one, let me how that one gets outbound capacity. This is the point you're asking about, right? How that node gets outbound capacity even though it doesn't have any funds on it. It's because if somebody opens a channel with me, then that means that I get then I can spend.
I think I know.
Okay.
So if it's an initial configuration, you've created 10 peering with your external from your external. You cannot instigate any transactions from the external node to the outside world. Transactions need to be instigated from the internal node, which will then send an amount of Bitcoin from the internal to your external node, and then your external node can then route that payment to the outside world.
Sorry, my brain was frozen for a second. It's so simple.
No, it's cool.
Yeah, so it's a routing node. It just sends payments along the way.
So this is actually quite limited in the sense because your external node then cannot do any routing for the network. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Just wait a second.
Actually, it can't. It needs to have outbound capacity. Let me think about it more, because there was some smart way. As I said, I didn't come up with it, so but I know that it works, and I know that it's been done. And when Jonas listens to this, he's probably going to get very mad that I screwed it all up logically. But maybe I'll figure it out in my head. But just for the listeners out there, there's a way to do it, and it works. But right now, the details are not so fluent in in our heads. So we'll come back to this, but that was just something I came up with randomly. And I want to say that if this works, it would be very easy to make this automated on Nix Bitcoin, that you have this node set up.
I tell you what you could do is at the end of this, you could sort of like think through it, or even ask Jonas, and then at the end of the video, I can have like a conclusion or something, and then I can explain it.
If I don't come up with it spontaneously now, but it does work, and I'll give you an answer on it. So with Nix Bitcoin, going into even more like what we were talking about with features, we stopped with join market and coin joins, but there's actually much more. We also make available a very good Electrum server. It's written in Rust, and it's the best Electrum server out there. It's called Electrum, and we make that available. So users.
Could you tell us what that is?
Yes, of course. There's this great desktop wallet, and it is also available for Android, called Electrum. It's one of the oldest ones out there. And what's cool about it is that you don't need to have the chain installed locally. What's not cool,
it's a lightweight wallet.
It's a lightweight wallet that doesn't really verify anything on chain. And that's what's uncool about it. It trusts Electrum servers somewhat to give it right information. So, and it does this by using many different ones and doing some simple verification also. But what's uncool about using other people's servers is that they know which coins you're looking up. So they know how much coins are in your balance, basically. So I don't really recommend using Electrum if you don't also host your own server. Because once you host your own server, it just becomes a very good and well-developed, stable wallet, and that has an interface to your own Bitcoin node. And that's how I would recommend using Bitcoin without coin joins or anything. That's how I would recommend how to use it right now. And Electrum also ships with a lot of support for hardware wallets. So you can have
the server, right? Oh no, the client.
The client and the server. And once you host your own server, you basically you have your own, full node tied to your hardware wallet. It's the easiest way to do it right now, I think.
Okay, so once I set up and ran my my Nix Bitcoin node, which is running there, it's the full node is the Electrum node.
The full node is an Electrum server which ties into your Bitcoin core node. It builds
the Bitcoin D,
Exactly, Bitcoin D. It builds a data set from Bitcoin D, which allows it to very easily verify transactions. And I really like Electrum S because it's limited, it's simple, and it's written in Rust. So at least you know that there's no memory vulnerabilities in it. There might be logic bugs, but since it's such a simple software, I would highly doubt it. So this is the strength, and that's why we ship with Electrum, which is one of the most useful features. And do you have any more questions, or should I move on to other features?
I think we can move on to other features. Yeah.
So another feature, I'm going crisscross. I'm not going in any logical order here. Another feature we do is backups. We have a backup module, and that module it's kind of not the end state right now because it's the perfect example of why we need to make extensibility easier on Nix Bitcoin. So the way that our module works right now is it uses duplicity. It might not be the best backup solution out there, but it works. And in the module, it sets by itself a file list of important files on the Nix Bitcoin node that it wants to make backups of. Okay, so the problem with this setup is that the module itself is determining what are the important files, and we actually want to turn it around. We want to make modules tell other modules, let's say C Lightning, tell the backup module what are C Lightning's important files that should be backed up. And that way, by reversing the way it works, you can very easily, anybody can build a new module and just tie it into the backup functionality of Nix Bitcoin, which just at its core, very simply, the backup module does one thing. It says this file is important. I'm going to synchronize it to any place whatsoever. I'm going to synchronize it in an encrypted way. It can be synchronized to a local hard drive, a local directory, which you can then fetch over another mean. It can sync out to Dropbox. It can sync anywhere, and it's fully encrypted with a password we automatically randomly generate. So that's something that was very easy with Nix OS, and a great feature of Nix Bitcoin is that it has this backup functionality. And let's say with LND, which has static channel backups by default.
So what is LND?
LND is the Lightning Network implementation, which isn't C Lightning.
Yeah, so the other one is C Lightning. Okay.
Yeah, and LND has this feature where it will just the problem with Lightning's channels is that when your node goes down, it's not like with a Bitcoin wallet where you just have a list of words that you need to enter again and it syncs from chain. The problem is that with Lightning, you have a bunch of channel states that you want to record. So what balance is in what channel with which person? So if that goes down and if you lose that, then you're screwed. Then you're reliant on the good nature of your peers to close the channel for you. Or let's say you have an old backup and you broadcast that, then you're really screwed, because then Lightning's own its protection features kick in and you lose your channel balance. So I don't know if we should get too into detail with that, but let's just leave it. Yeah. Okay, so Lightning. Okay. With Lightning, the security is that if somebody broadcasts an old channel state to his peer, that peer can prove to the network that it was false, and the other person, as a punishment, loses his remaining balance in the channel. I think. Maybe I said something wrong.
It's a punishment mechanism.
It's a punishment mechanism, and it's very effective. And there hasn't been any fraud on the Lightning network.
Does that exist with both C Lightning and LND?
Yeah, it's inherent to the protocol because we need.
You mean it's on layer 1?
No, it's on layer 2. But Lightning is there's a specification for Lightning. So LND and C Lightning are developed to a specification, so it's inherent to Lightning Network. The problem we're trying to solve here is that somebody comes online, somebody closes the channel, and with a old balance. At some point the balance is valid, but it's just an old state. Let's say right now I have 100 left on my channel, and I spend 99. And then I just close the channel and broadcast the old state where I still had 100. So I just stole 99.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to prevent. And there's approval mechanism for your peer to go onto the base layer and show that was a fake transaction, and you can take your funds.
Yeah.
And it's trustless. So for that to happen, though, you need to be online. So that's maybe a weakness of Lightning Network, that somebody needs to be online at least once in a couple of days in order to make sure that nobody's broadcasting an old state on the base layer and closing the channel. But you need to keep track of your channel states, and this is where static channel backups come in. So with C Lightning, and I think there's a way to do it. There's a plugin or something, but with LND, this feature will. I'm thinking of this right now. I'm gonna code this feature in because it's very important to have channel backups even for C Lightning users. So with our backup module, that would allow you to automatically several times a day make a backup of your channels. States, and then if your node goes down, all data is lost, then you can come back online to the network with all your states intact. Right. So that's a basic overview. I think I got maybe something wrong. I'm not sure of the way static channel backups work. I'm not so deep into the Lightning protocol, but for various reasons, it's beneficial to back up data in an encrypted way for Bitcoin nodes and only important data. You don't need to store the entire blockchain. You just want to store certain keys and secrets. And it also serves as an example, as I said, for the way we don't want to move forward and we want to change the way that module works. And we want everything higher up on the abstraction layer to tie into lower modules and not the other way around. If that makes sense to you and your viewers.
It makes sense to me. I'm not done about my the viewers. So no, I'm keeping a lot of mental notes.
It's a fundamental way of doing software development, which is that you want to make it easily extensible, so anybody can write their own code and tie into what's existing. But if we, in the existing layer, make dependencies on the higher layers, then it becomes you need to change the base layer before you can change the higher layers. So in the example of the backup module, if some rando wanted to write a new module, then he would also have to make a PR, a pull request, changing the backup module to include his files in the file list of important files. So that's an example of a feature in Nix Bitcoin. And then we also have BTC Pay server support, which is it's one of the worst. Sorry, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but the program is not what I want it to be. It's like it's a huge mono. It's a way of doing Bitcoin transactions, a Bitcoin transaction server. So a merchant just sets up a BTC Pay server, and when people check out goods in his online store, it'll just redirect, if he wants to pay with Bitcoin, to his own self-hosted BTC Pay server, and then people can pay with Bitcoin, Lightning, or even altcoins to that to that server. So it's basically a payment processing server, self-hosted for Bitcoin. But it's targeted towards people of like merchants who don't necessarily have a high level of technical skill. So what BTC Pay server does is it packages everything into itself. So it has a web server in it, it has an accounting mechanism, a GUI, a management interface, a checkout interface, like themes. It's a huge program, and something as simple
so it's like a shopping cart kind of thing.
A post shopping cart. It's a checkout page for Bitcoin. It's a payment page for Bitcoin, but everything is solved in this one server, short of an actual Bitcoin node. But they ship a Docker image where even that is included. So it's like more of it's an OS. Let's say sometimes we joke that like it's only going to be a while until there's a BTC Pay server kernel. And I think there's a lot of merit to it, but something as simple as getting a via API and a Lightning invoice, it doesn't work. Like you can't just do a request to a BTC Pay server to return a Lightning invoice for a certain amount. And I think that's just an example of something like with all the nice features. Like this is what happens when you program software this way. Then like you don't have the base level features unified. Like so as you can hear, there's some software that's still not perfect in Bitcoin. Who would have thought? So, but we include that because it's a standard right now and it actually does work, and people love it. Like, and normal people love it because it does what they want. And maybe there's a better alternative that comes around, but for now that's what we have. And it's one of those things. But with Nix Bitcoin, it's also possible to set up, let's say, a BTC Pay server on one side and then a Bitcoin node on the other, on another machine, like two separate machines, and then connect those two up, let's say with a WireGuard tunnel or some other kind of tunnel. So, and do all of that in an automated way. So even scaling across multiple machines is possible with NixOS. Which is a likely use case probably for merchants that maybe want to have their web server and stuff optimized outside of the same hardware that they host their Bitcoin node on.
Right.
So this is the kind of stuff that's possible. But I think the core feature set right now, if I'd have to say, is Bitcoin and the Lightning Network and stuff, and everything else builds on there. But what we have right now, those base features, I think it's the best out there if you're not looking for a graphical stuff, or if you're not tied mentally into the way that traditional Linux distributions work. I mean, some people are really tied into Debian, and they know it and they want to keep stuff that way. But let's say you're not tied into that, and you're not tied into GUIs for religiously tied into GUIs, which some people are. Some people will never, they just hear command line and they think I can't do it, but it's not that way. So it's actually simpler in my opinion. So so if none of those boxes tick for you and you're ready to learn a lot of useful skills and future stuff with future things that are going to be important in the future with systems management, then you should invest the time to become a NixOS / Nix Bitcoin user.
Huzzah! Yes, definitely.
So I seem to not be the only one recommending NixOS here.
No, I mean I've been using Bitcoin for not Bitcoin, NixOS for about maybe more than half a decade, like 8 years now.
Wow,
it's my standard.
I just switched my laptop systems from CubesOS to NixOS. And I feel my paranoia side is not so happy, but my, not having 16 gigabytes of RAM at all times being used and a battery life of 30 minutes and all this abstraction layers, I was very happy about it. The worst thing for me with CubesOS was always that backups are huge and there's no way to make them incremental. So you end up doing a 100 or 200 or 300 gigabyte backup every single day, which I think is ridiculous. Since everything is in a VM, you can't really, there's no easy way to make it incremental, the data. The data state is fragmented across virtual, this data, hard drives or whatever, the file systems are not unified. It's very weird.
Yeah. The way I consoled my paranoia with regard to NixOS is that, essentially solving security problems can essentially be boiled down to patching software, right? So if you're running NixOS just moves from one snapshot of a universe to another snapshot of a universe. So if you basically sit on unstable or basically on head, you're going to be getting the latest patches to the software.
So I think that patching is a very important thing, but I'd have to disagree in two regards. That one, some software we use right now is completely broken. Like X11, completely broken on a security state. So Wayland is the only way forward.
I agree completely, dude.
And you can use it with NixOS. It's very easy to use with NixOS Wayland. So for anybody who doesn't know what X11 is, the way on Linux, which is kind of embarrassing that GUIs work, is that every GUI, and that means every Firefox, let's take Firefox and Thunderbird. Firefox can see what is on Thunderbird's screen and can read what keys are being typed into Thunderbird. And Thunderbird can see what keys are being typed into Firefox, which is actually ridiculous. So as soon as you get any kind of GUI program onto a Linux machine, it's a complete security fail. Key logging, everything is easy. It's like I'm not saying you need an exploit. It's like the actual way it works. So X11 is it's just an example. So with NixOS, I think that a lot of you can build a pretty secure system, which for me was Wayland, and I use this program called Bubble Wrap for sandboxing stuff. So Bubble Wrap is an unprivileged sandbox. What that means is that unlike other sandboxing mechanisms, the program itself doesn't need root. So there's no hole to get root to the actual sandboxing program, which is kind of funny. Like people install sandboxing programs that end up being the security hole in their system when there's a bug in that. So the way that it works is that it creates a whole new basically container, and you only give into that container the features and the files that the program actually needs. So it's and that combined with Wayland, combined with maybe even AppArmor and sensible systems management, I think makes NixOS adequate in terms of security. Maybe the supply chain stuff is still relevant, but even for desktop system, I'm moving away from CubesOS, and I've been using it for a long time. So I can say NixOS is a viable future.
Okay, so the main reason for that was purely for convenience. Is that right? Was it becoming...
I forgot another point where I had disagreed. I said I disagreed in two regards. One was that security, some of the stuff we use is completely broken, and getting every single patch the minute it's typed by somebody wouldn't fix that either. Yeah. And secondly, security is only 30% or 33% if you want to go with natural. So only a third it's technical, and 2/3 it's human. Mm-hmm. What that means is that you can have like all these technical mitigations, but if software isn't patched regularly and systems aren't managed well, and the principle of least privilege isn't applied, and randos have access to the computer, human level stuff, organizational things like patching, installing updates, and reacting to security vulnerabilities and reacting to threats and breaches. That's like things are going to get hacked. The question is how you deal with it and how much privilege escalation and how much lateral movement that hacked computer allows in your organization.
Right.
So with NixOS, the strength is that you can manage systems very easily. So the human factor becomes much easier. And since that's the majority of security, you can disregard the small losses you have on the technical side, and you can scale securely across machines. And it allows you to react to security issues very quickly, and all these other security that are even more important than the latest kernel hardening. So that's why, even on a security point, I wouldn't say that NixOS is fundamentally inferior to very complex and contrived alternatives like CubesOS.
I agree. And as you mentioned on the human side of things, like it makes for reproducible systems across an entire company, if need be, and especially when you combine Nix with Nix Ops. Oh, dude, have you reached that level? Have you explored Nix Ops?
Yeah, we've explored Nix Ops so far that we hate Nix Ops.
Oh, really?
So here's like we're very partial about software. So like
no. I know, but okay, all right.
Nix Ops Nix Ops is stateful, which sucks.
I know.
So there's an alternative called Crops out there that is like literally it just copies your sources over and executes Nix rebuild switch. And
you can.
So like, why did it need to be this complicated? And also what it gets rid of all the cross-platform stuff because you build software locally. Like you just,
Oh, dude, really? Okay,
and
because that's one of the issues I'm facing at the moment. Because no, dude, crops, CROPS.
No, KROPS. And
KROPS.
And crops has this other cool thing that like your secret store, your local secret store on the deployment directory can be a password store directory. If you know what password store is, it's like this very simple Unix utility for password management. And honestly, if you're using another password manager, you're lame because password store is the ultimate. Like it's just a file directory and a GPG like scripts to decrypt what's in that file directory when you need it. And it's so simple. Why did we have to make password management so complicated?
Because it sells.
Exactly. This is the problem with software that like people make money off of complexity and selling bad stuff. And it's and with Linux and with Unix and with OpenBSD and maybe the other BSDs, I'm not too familiar with them. We have the option of saying no. We don't want to participate in this rent-seeking BS. We want to be like we want to use actually functional software that doesn't have like unpatched vulnerabilities and hidden stuff and this is why I guarantee you, if anybody here is listening and is using Windows or Mac OS or any other thing, proprietary software, and they're caught in this and they think that it's so important and convenient and, get out of that, like get out of that rent-seeking world and put in the time to become free. So small digression on, I was talking initially about what again?
No. Just, inject a little bit of Stallman freedom in there,
Yes, password store. So crops, you can just have your local secrets directory, password store encrypted. So even on your local drive, your passwords aren't, unencrypted and exposed to things. And with password store, the cool thing, and this is where it goes like, this is where we see how powerful the Unix philosophy is. So everybody bear with me. Password store is built on top of GPG, and all it does is it's an interface for decrypting and encrypting files that store plain text files storing passwords into a standard file directory, and everything is encrypted using GPG, which is a well-proven, some people are against it, but a very functional encryption tool. And that encryption tool over the years has added capabilities like using smart cards, okay? And smart cards store your key on a separate device. And smart cards separately, the hardware manufacturers have allowed a way of making it so that for every decryption on a smart card, you need to press the actual smart card. You need to physically interact with it. So by doing the Unix philosophy, we have now utilized the creative work of at least 3 different people: the password store developers, the GPG developers, and the hardware smart card manufacturers. And we've added all the benefits of them together. Imagine if Windows had to develop all of that. They had to be a hardware, a security key, a smart card manufacturer. They had to program a password store and an encryption utility. That would never work properly. So by specializing and making interfaces, we are able to make a password directory where hold down, nobody, I'm scared people are going to faint when they hear this, that for every password decryption, you need to physically interact with your device. And somebody who steals your password, like with a traditional password manager, doesn't have access to all of your passwords. They are sitting in front of a encrypted directory, and every password they want to get out, you need to physically interact with the device for every decryption operation. So it's a very, like, this is this is the way to do password management. And this is why the Unix philosophy is so powerful. And Crops is more aligned with that philosophy than NixOps, which is stateful. We have a PR up right now, and it's getting very close to being merged, where we completely throw out NixOps and replace it with Crops.
So yeah, okay. I'm really glad I didn't know about Crops, but the stateful aspect of NixOps was the downside that I did not like about NixOps. But it's still a wonderful feeling having an entire group of computers that are just like at control of a fingertip control, all run by NixOps.
So
do you see what I mean?
With Crops, you can do that too. And it's stateful. Maybe the viewers don't know what the problem with statefulness is, but I can only say that state is an issue. You want to reduce your state as much as possible. And state means the amount of data that doesn't boil down to your NixOS configuration. So that's statelessness. Is that you can always deploy the same state from that NixOS configuration. But you'll never be able to deploy your documents and your music from a NixOS configuration. So that's the stateful rest that remains. And NixOS does it beautifully that it keeps that stateful stuff in different directories. So in order to do backups, you just back up those stateful directories, and the rest of the system you can just regenerate from your NixOS configuration. So, but back to you, I think you probably have a better understanding of why NixOps sucks with its statefulness.
No, it's just if you just go down to like functional programming, and you got like everything sort of boils down to like how you can manage state and make sure it doesn't screw you up the ass kind of thing. But talking about that physical access, like on this dongle that I'm actually it's based on open hardware. There's a guy named Neba. There's a lot of a debt of gratitude is owed to an open source programmer called Neba Yamate, I think so, in Japan. I met him in 2013. He came out here to Hong Kong, and he created this dongle called the FST Flying Stone Technology -01, and it's all open hardware, as well as his the firmware that goes on this thing. And in the latest version of it, he's included a HAL sensor, HAL, which is basically it's the equivalent of like an UB key where you press it. Except that you use a magnet. So if there's a magnet that's in close proximity to this thing, then it will it'll show that it'll tell the device that actually that you have physical proximity to the thing. I suppose. I mean, you could.
That's awesome. Yeah. Could we do a quick break? I just want to go to the bathroom for a second.
Yeah, no problem.
We'll edit it out of the recording, of course.
Of course. Okay,
perfect. So we left off with the Unix philosophy and its power. So what were you going to say? Sorry, I cut you off.
Then I went into this HAL sensor that on this little dongle, and it's sort of like probably a useless tangent. Overlapping with what you just mentioned about this, the Unix philosophy, and anyway, we can it's a negligible. We can move on.
So moving on with Nix Bitcoin, we talk a lot about security, but at the same time, I think that the same things that make it secure make it very usable and very easy to use. And I'm very happy that you said it was easy to install. So I always thought that, but a lot of people seem to have had issues. I think it's gotten much easier over time. So I like to use this endorsement to also tell the users that it makes the actual software better also if you use it and if you file bug reports. And this aligns with the general the general idea of how good software is developed is that there's a finish line, and at some point it just gets better and better and better with the same feature set.
Right. No, I completely agree with that. I mean, like as I mentioned, it's like, like I'm strongly considering using, for me, creating some sort of like a Nix thing to actually deploy software it's a great way forward. But if you're going to build layer 2 technology, I kind of want to, it's more involved because you're going to have a full node on there. It's going to be a whole bunch of stuff. So yeah, optimally, you'd want to integrate with something like Nix Bitcoin and actually target that, and reach those security, the bar of entry, the high standards that are set by Nix Bitcoin, and then you are an upstanding hacker that contributes to that little ecosystem. And
exactly,
yeah,
and the same model that we use with Nix Bitcoin can be used to standardize pretty much all software that requires uptime. And like, let's say I have this other private project that I call Nix Darknet, which I'm going to open source at some point.
Ooh.
And what we to do is just to launch a router with either I2P or Tor installed, and a bunch of other features that rely on I2P and Tor, like a ZNC bouncer for IRC servers, Darknet IRC stuff, which is very interesting. I recommend people get on like Darknet IRC servers, because that's where people talk about very interesting things and ideas. And I got a lot of good ideas and good technical stuff there. So but basically having your own digital property, either physically in your home or physically in a data center or physically in office, or even a virtual private server or dedicated server somewhere, gives you a seat at the table, makes you one of the big boys on the internet. You don't want to be a sharecropper on somebody else's proprietary closed platform, giving them data and giving them all this knowledge. And even with like what I said earlier, it makes our software better if you use it and you file bug reports. And what you're doing without knowing it by using these proprietary platforms is you're making them better and better through your usage. So yeah. Having your own servers, like mail servers, all this stuff is very cool. And the problem is, for most of the time, self-hosting, it gets complicated, and it's very easy to make security mistakes. But with NixOS, we can share the same config for a mail server and we can make it configurable enough so it works for many people. But we can share that, and all a user now needs to do is deploy his own mail server from a NixOS repo called maybe Nix-mail server or something. Or I think there's even something called simple NixOS mail server. And he just has a functioning mail server on his own digital property. And he doesn't need to read huge guides and tutorials. And this mail gets very complicated. So, which when we were setting up this interview, we were having some mail issues because I use this mail service called I2P Mail, which is like a hobbyist thing. And I don't know if it's timing decorrelation or just that technical issues, but messages get delivered like a day later sometimes. So
I noticed that. I actually sent a few test emails thinking, what the fuck is going on here? It's like, oh, am I getting through to you? It's like, what the hell?
No, you're not, because maybe it's a privacy feature, but I'm not sure. But yeah, I think but I2P Mail does this really cool thing, which they strip all identifying information from your email headers. So you add like your mail client adds a lot of unnecessary information to mail headers, like who it is, like IDs, everything that can be traced back to you and is completely unnecessary. And what I2P Mail does is strips that all away. So that's a great feature of it. And it's a hobbyist project. I think it's one of those cool things that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. But I'd like to make it so I think that NixOS is a real avenue towards standardizing server setups and sharing information.
Yeah,
we want to, like, in the Fluffy Pony interview, I keep going back to the Indaba. He also talked about like the update server. Why is that stuff secret? The Monero server. Why are people keeping their configurations secret? Put it out there, make it open source, share the knowledge with other people, you know, and review each other's system setups. It's the same way that programs, open source programs, are awesome because people are reviewing them. We can also do the same thing for entire server configurations, infrastructure as code. So and as shared code. So that's a huge avenue of NixOS. That I think that Nix Bitcoin is one of the first projects to do that, but we can make a lot of different setups, like Nix, like I talked about, Nix Darknet, mail servers, matrix servers, XMPP servers, all this stuff that, like, there was a huge barrier to decentralization because it was difficult to set up servers. No, now every normie, let's not say normie, but like, let's say generally technically competent people can deploy their own servers on hardware they trust, and or servers that they physically own. Like, we can, at least for ourselves, we can, you know, even without fixing the fundamentals of the internet, which you were talking about, we can at least like use our own systems. We don't need to be on the sharecropping farm. We don't need to be sharecroppers on the farm.
So I've never really heard this expression. Oh, wait, before I do that, have you heard of Nixcloud? Joachim, I think he's based out in Germany. He did the Nixcloud stuff. He's got a similar mentality to you. You know, he's created Nix scripts which abstract out the whole mail server. What's that mail client written by DJB?
By who?
Daniel Bernstein.
Qmail.
That's the one, Qmail. Yeah, I think it abstracts out Qmail. And a whole, you know, web servers and all of that stuff. I was quite impressed. Actually, I run some of that stuff. Anyway, you might want to take a look at that.
Awesome. No, I didn't know that was around.
Yeah, so take a look for Nixcloud. And then you can go through they've got a couple of repositories which do web stuff and do email stuff, a whole bunch of stuff. You might be able to pull some code from there.
Even if you don't one-to-one use the code, you can just read it and replicate the good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. He's Ashlich. Ashlich is quite famous within the Nix community. Do you know him?
No, I've never heard.
Okay, he's quite a wild figure. I think he's part of a game development called Red Moon Software or something. He's got this wild beard, long hair, and the dude's amazing with code. It's really cool. I really dig that guy. Anyway, he was collaborating with the Nixcloud guys, and they created this whole suite of applications you might want to take a look at. Maybe you can pull something into the Nix Bitcoin stuff. That'd be cool. Yeah.
So right now, of course, Nix Bitcoin is getting most of my attention. So I'm not forking. I'm not like open sourcing a bunch of stuff that I should be open sourcing, but I think that Nix Bitcoin is in a critical phase where, with enough attention, it can become stable and usable for everybody who is remotely technically capable.
Yeah. And are you employed to work on this, or is this like a hack project kind of thing?
I'd say that it's more in line with the general philosophy of Nix Bitcoin, which is just scratch your own itch and not building these businesses. Not yet, at least. Why? It's not yet. And right now it's just MIT license. Like I wouldn't care if tomorrow somebody made Nix Bitcoin 2, and just forked the code and changed the logo and it doesn't matter to us. It's all free software, and if you want to use it, please do, and please give bug reports. And even if you struggled with something, don't think that that we don't care and that we're elitist in some way. we want to hear whatever experience you had with the software. If you found something unclear in the install manual, it's all about getting your knowledge into the code. So even like some people think that they don't write code and they can't contribute to open source software, which is complete nonsense. You can, it's some of the most important stuff comes from people that don't use code, that just give bug reports and testing and stuff like that. So please, if you do install it, then give feedback. Even if it's not a GitHub issue, like write an email or join the IRC channel, and just like we need and we would appreciate everybody's feedback, and that way we can pool your experience and knowledge and make the product better, like continuously.
I suppose in one sense, something like Nix Bitcoin could also be a point of attack for institutions that want to, let's say Nix Bitcoin becomes the de facto way of running your own Lightning node setup, and it's an accumulation of a large amount of, say, years from now, accumulation of a large amount of knowledge on good security practices, and you set one attribute field and then you get the best real world like security wrapped up via these reproducible Nix expressions. It also sounds like you guys are a good point to be compromised by a state actor.
Yeah, it's definitely not there yet, I think.
I know.
But it's what is there to compromise? Like that's the interesting thing. I mean, somebody could compromise the signing process, okay, but if we do get that big, then we'll do multi-signed releases, and you're encouraged anyway to just clone the repo and read the code, so you don't even need to worry about like us signing malicious code. So the only thing that people could do is attack make a supply chain attack on the users, and what we want to do is stay open, and I hope NixOS gets better in this regard, but like audit stuff and make it and only use a small subset of packages and audit all of those in some respect, and or rely on other trusted parties who audit, and stuff is reproducible. So even like there's something called Trustix that came out right now, which we're waiting for desperately. Which right now with NixOS, there's a very strong security downside, which is if you build from binary caches, so you don't actually build the software yourself, you just pull in binaries, those binaries could be compromised. And what Trustix does is that it distributes the builds, and since NixOS is reproducible, a user on his site can just check if he's getting the same binary from different binary caches. So let's say he trusts the NixOS Foundation, and he trusts us, and he trusts maybe a third other person, then he can say if 2 out of 3 of those people agree that that is the correct hash of the software, then that's the correct binary. And that fixes the binary cache problem. But what it doesn't fix is that the actual source code which underlies it could include a vulnerability, and on that front we get into like expression integrity and signing stuff and doing and distributing trust. But I think that if we do move towards a central way of deploying of building Bitcoin and like doing node management, probably something in the direction of reproducible builds and auditable code is the way forward. It would be worse if the standard node is a Debian, like a traditional Linux distribution, or even worse if it were some kind of proprietary. Like let's say there's an Apple node, and you just plug the Apple node into your Apple router, and everything is Apple, and the cables are, this is how Apple is, like Apple cables onto an Apple router with Apple protocol. So let's say this is the way it goes. And that fundamentally also breaks the network. It doesn't break, but it compromises the network security, because the security of Bitcoin also relies on node operators making decisions about new features, which is what we're seeing with Taproot activation right now. There's a consensus, and if Apple just has like 1 million people on like normies on its node that it just auto pushes out updates to, it can add any feature it wants to Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So of course we wouldn't accept like we wouldn't accept it, but like for the normies, it could fundamentally change the way Bitcoin works.
Sure. I had a whole line of questions, and then you enter the Taproot, and I'm like, damn it, yes, I needed to talk about Taproot. There's some interesting stuff coming into Taproot, as well as with the Schnorr signatures. Do you want to go into talking about that and describing
Taproot
what this is?
Jonas is the Taproot man. Like, it's so cool that on the Nix Bitcoin team, we have somebody who actually wrote Taproot.
Dude, it's freaking amazing. That's one of the reasons. So, like, I actually emailed Jonas, and I was like, Jonas, come on, man, I want to hear a talk about Taproot. He ghosted me. The dude ghosted me. So, but I mean, maybe you guys talk behind the scenes, and I don't know, whatever. But I would love to have heard. But maybe you know about Taproot, and you can go into details.
I'm not an expert. Let me put it this way, but I support it, and I like the idea. And sorry, I'm not. I usually the way that I learn things is that they have to exist, and then I try them, and then I learn them. Like, I'm not. I don't usually learn things on paper, so maybe that's a fault. But that's like just something.
No, this is the hacker mentality.
This is the
hacker. This is the hacker mentality. It's like, people say, yeah, I want to become a hacker. You learn by doing. Like hackers, like 98% doing,
So of course I could have used Taproot by doing initially, but like, it's just I don't know. It just hasn't piqued my interest yet. I think that if when it works, it will pique my interest, but I've heard from enough people, and I've heard enough benefits of it that I think that it should be activated. But what we disagree with, and our project is officially anti-LOT equals true immediately. So LOT is this mechanism called lock-in on timeout, where let's say that miners time out and don't add Taproot to the chain in a certain time span, then what lock-in on timeout does is just automatically lock that feature in. So,
whoa, sorry, can you explain that again?
So it will just users like who run a node with LOT equals true, that flag will, regardless of the miners and whether they have signal consensus, will automatically activate the feature on their end.
Okay.
So that could I think that fundamentally breaks the way that Bitcoin changes to Bitcoin work. We need to get consensus, and the way we measure consensus is by miner signaling. And once those miners don't cooperate, then we can think about doing a user activated thing and just basically holding a gun to their head and saying, we won't accept your blocks if you don't do this. But doing that right off the bat, it's not a good precedent, and we are anti that. Like, once it's apparent that miners are not signaling, then we can think about doing LOT equals true. So doing it on a user side, but like that goes against our philosophy. We are not move fast, break things, ideological. Our project is also completely unideological. If you're a communist or anything, you can come work on the project. This is not we're not an activist project. This is we align to very certain values technologically, and of course everything's geared towards freedom. But we don't discriminate against anybody, and we don't care. Like, the software doesn't care. Maybe I can't say none of the developers care. And maybe it's not even a bad thing if they care. But in terms of there's no political stance. It's a neutral project, and also our values are user freedom and these things. But there's no no overarching political motivation. It's just not that kind of motivation. And so that also this bad miners, good users, and like that's not the paradigm we follow when we develop. And and we don't want to break people's software, and we also want to keep Bitcoin's slow movement feature. Bitcoin slow. Its resilience against changes, because that fundamentally is the reason why it works. Is that otherwise Google would have just added new features. There wasn't this extreme bias against new features, then Bitcoin wouldn't exist anymore. So we agree with that, and we're anti LOT equals true.
I firmly agree with that too, because like when you look at the altcoins, and some of them have these auto updating features. Jesus freaking Christ, they've got these auto updating features whereby a single entity can actually update in the entire network. That is just
that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Most altcoins also why altcoins are dumb is that none of them can replicate Bitcoin's pristine inception. When Bitcoin came about, there was no such knowledge of such a thing as a cryptocurrency. So the distribution happened completely unbiased. There wasn't nobody initially accrued a pre-mine or a huge control over the coins. Some people theorize that Satoshi controls millions of coins, but it's just not the case. I mean, lots of people have sold Bitcoin, and it's just like this organic growth, and nobody will ever be able to replicate that. And another thing that nobody will ever be able to replicate is Satoshi, who in a great wisdom disappeared himself, that which wouldn't be possible now because of the attention to cryptocurrencies. I hate even to use that dumb word, but cryptocurrencies. So it's very difficult to decentralize a project now. Most altcoins have what we call a BDFL, benevolent dictator for life. And I heard what Fluffy Pony said, and it's interesting that they're trying to go decentralize from this benevolent dictator, but at the same time, I'm not sure how many percent of the Monero community would just follow what Fluffy Pony says, since he's obviously the most respected individual in the community. I think that this consensus would pretty much form around what he says and his opinion, although maybe that's not the case anymore since he's stepping back. But let's say it's not the case for the vast majority of altcoins, and even for Monero, I don't think that it's as complete of a power, of a relinquishing of power as Satoshi did. And I think that was maybe one of the smartest things he did, was to disappear and let the thing run itself.
Yeah,
and that's also one more small point. People who say Bitcoin doesn't have governance or doesn't have good governance are stupid. This the thing that makes it strong is that there's no governance.
Stupid. They're not stupid. They're shilling Bitcoin. They're shilling shitcoins.
Yeah, this is like a covert statist mentality that you need to have a structure. I think. Have you seen The Wire?
The
TV series. Yeah.
Oh, it's one of my favorite. I love.
There's a scene in it where they set up this syndicate where they collaborate. The different drug dealers in Baltimore, they set up like a co-op, they call it, where they collaborate, and somebody's on the initial meeting is in there taking notes, and Stringer Bell, one of the initiators of the co-op, says, "Are you taking notes on an effing criminal conspiracy?" Of course, of course we're not doing criminal conspiracy and all this stuff. Of course we're not. We don't do. This is not criminal, and we certainly don't want to have anything to do with people who are violent and all this stuff. But we can learn one or two things from them, and that is that formal governance structures are very easy to corrupt. Let's say the mafia had like a governance board and they voted and there was a democratic process, how easy would it be for the government first to get insight into it and second to corrupt it from inside? Like having a formalized structure is very easy to manipulate, and there's always going to be power struggles to gain controls over those formalized levers. So another aspect where we can totally see this, and I don't mean this might be wrong, and I don't mean to disparage anybody, but I think that the Catholic Church is very formalized in the way that power works there, and I think nobody can disagree that there's a large amount of power struggles that go on within that, and maybe sometimes even bad people gain control over certain layers of power there. So I think that like we can learn one thing at least from people who are living under dangerous circumstances, that formalizing governance structures might be a smart thing to do for efficiency, but it's not a smart thing to do for resiliency.
Yeah, this conversation topic can open up a whole rat's nest of different sort of stuff. But as I'm getting older, I came from the real sort of the cypherpunk, crypto anarchist sort of mindset, and it's still very firmly rooted in that. But now, as I'm getting older, I'm starting to appreciate the systems that exist around us, and believe it or not, in some ways, in some mechanisms and means, different governance in different sort of especially within not the Hong Kong government as we know today. Maybe, but the one that has persisted for 100 years through. There's certain levels of appreciation I've got for this. For example,
this is the key point. You've just stated the key point. It used to be cool, and now it's not. Why did it change? Because there's a formalized way of changing it.
I mean, it gets very complicated, especially with the West reducing themselves and becoming so politically correct that they've and inflating their monetary systems to hell and gone. And so therefore the influence within Hong Kong has deflated. And now China's just sort of moved in. But my point is there is beneficial stuff that has arisen from even the Catholic religion form of governance in the sense of hierarchy. They introduced the concept of roles that get allocated to different individuals, and as a result, during that particular time frame, it was a significant step up in stability of the organization compared to an organization that has not embodied the concept of hierarchy and allocating roles and responsibilities to individuals. Those types of organizations could be seen as a kind of a mafioso or mafia kind of organization, where the strongest lead, and if I'm stronger than the leader, then I put a knife in their back. You see what I mean? So this is a very sort of a bloodthirsty sort of environment. But the Catholic religion mitigated that by introducing the concept of hierarchy and allocating responsibility to people, such that those individuals could be shipped off into different parts of the world and set up different levels of responsibility to, or what are they called? When you go preach abroad or something like that. So in that way, it made the Catholic organization more robust against the factors that would destroy a typical organization.
So here we get into layers again. I think the Catholic Church could have decentralized on the base layer, and there could have been organizations under the umbrella that then have hierarchies, but that don't completely constitute the faith. So let's say they send missionaries out, then it could be somebody on behalf of a smaller organization under the umbrella, and the check on that organization happens through the rough consensus of the other ones.
Yeah, now we're talking about a time frame where communication pathways was a month in sending a letter to and fro. Yeah, still kind of need that centralized coordination to be able to ship out these sort of things. I mean, you're talking about a distributed sort of environment, right? Distributed graph where you have a series of nodes all together and then they're connected between each other. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to...
I'm talking about like in the Catholic Church, for example, you have a large amount of like there's different players like I think Jesuits, Opus Dei, and other forces within the church, and those could have with no problem, and they do. The funny thing is that even with this centralized apparatus, the control over individual actors still rests to a large part within these interest groups. So why not just not give the complete stamp of approval to every actor from the base layer and decentralize into those interest groups that exist anyway?
Yeah, because the base layer, that there's one organization that did the printing of money, and it was pretty much that. That was the organization. So I mean, at that point, there's the concept of government and separation of religion and state hadn't sort of, I don't think it had come about at that point. It was still an understanding that came about much later, and it's only now in the evolution of our humanity have we even come across the idea of being able to separate money and state. You see what I mean? So
but I disagree. The natural order was that money was separate from the state.
Correct. Initially, correct. You're absolutely right. We used seashells and we used, yak turds. We used all sorts of tobacco. Hey?
Gold.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the initial money was this natural stuff, but it's a commodity, right? Like as it becomes more popular, you can create more of it. So gold was the natural sort of the most efficient of money at the time, and it could store value across generations. But it has its flaws. Like recently, a friend of mine bought some gold. We went drinking. I left early, and he had all his gold stolen. So it's a problem.
That's a problem with physical property of any kind.
Exactly.
Even like houses, which for some reason people in the West now think is a store of value. Even houses can be stolen. I don't know if people realize this, but governments have and can just say this house belongs to somebody else or to me.
Like here in Hong Kong, we're getting a very real reality check of that. There's a national security law that's been introduced here, which says that we can seize your private property. And for the past long time here in Hong Kong, we've always had private property. So the concept of suddenly the government being able to take private property is like, what the hell? And every other nation state can do that.
But Bitcoin is different in that aspect.
It is different.
And also what it allows you to do, which I don't know if you know this person, he's called Max Hillebrand. He's very, very prolific on Twitter, but he wrote a paper or at least he spread the idea, and I subscribe. I think that's a very interesting idea, that Bitcoin is one of the first, maybe the only non-abstracted multi-party ownership. A multi-sig contract is one of the first.
Oh, you mean it's a bearer asset?
No, it's one of the first. A Bitcoin is one of the first things that you can non-virtually own in a group. So let's say a piece of gold. How do you own a piece of gold as a group?
It's true.
You abstract something around. You build a safe with many keys. You put it into a trust, which certain people have access to legally, but you always need somebody else to enforce it. Bitcoin is the first thing that you can actually own shared without any other party enforcing that, except of course the very decentralized base layer. Very interesting idea, but Bitcoin is a new form of property, and it's very interesting to think about it. It might be the first thing that you can actually own, in large quantities of value without increasing the cost to such a point. I mean, let's say we throw out buildings because those are not really owned, but just virtually owned.
Right.
And we say, let's talk about something like gold. If you store $1 billion of gold, that costs a lot of money. If you store $1 billion of Bitcoin, that costs maybe, let's say you do a crazy setup with many different hardware wallets and all this kind of like security across different vaults, across different countries, maybe even natural cache. Let's take everything together. It'll cost you $10,000 or $20,000. That's cool.
If that, you can do a Shamir secret sharing across a number of titanium tablets. Punch the Shamir secret sharing output into that.
But Shamir secret assumes that the secret sharing assumes that there's one trusted device, which I wouldn't do. Like you have all the keys on one device and you split them. I'd rather like do a multi-sig and like have an OpenBSD laptop and a hardware wallet.
Ooh.
The chance of both of those being compromised is very low. Maybe the interesting thing is maybe it's more difficult to compromise an OpenBSD laptop than a hardware wallet. Very interesting idea, but I think that it might be the case.
Well, a hardware wallet with physical access, you mean?
No, the supply chain attack on the hardware wallet might be more like, okay. How many companies do you have that build hardware wallets? Like, let's say five actual ones. Let's take the most popular one, like Trezor. And not to single out Trezor, I think it's a very good product, but like how many people work there and view the actual factory stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And it's 100% that Bitcoin is going to be stored on that. Otherwise, somebody wouldn't buy it. With OpenBSD, like you can just go out and buy a random laptop and you have like an install extremely well audited code on it, and it never like touches the internet. So I think that in a certain way that maybe like this is only for people who actually know what they're doing, but hardware wallets are not the maximum of security. Maybe. Yeah. I know that people have very strong opinions on this, but I'm just putting this out there.
If it's a Huawei tablet, I might take.
I might also disagree, but let's say you have some kind of ThinkPad or other computer that you can actually physically remove chips on. I think it's pretty good. Of course, you have all this Tempest stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but like there's an NSA program on how to exfiltrate data without actually without actual networking access. So you can read all these kinds of electromagnetic signatures but let's say this is out of scope. And it's also like with hardware wallets, I think it's the same thing. Like they also leak data electromagnetically. So but we got to this from the governance systems. And I don't think we completely finished that point, but I think that
keep going.
So with if you compare the let me think. So the most resilient. It's best if we choose an example comparable to the Catholic Church that is in the same realm. So let's go maybe with Judaism, which is a religion as old, if not maybe even older or probably older. It completely works on rough consensus. There's no central authority. There's no, there's certain texts, and in order to, and certain oral texts, laws and ideas that have now been put on paper, but nobody controls what people say in the name of Judaism. But if you say something that goes against any of those papers, then you're not taken seriously by anybody. So there's a whole process of changes, and there's no central management.
Conventions that surround it.
Conventions that surround it, and there. So I think that Bitcoin more works in that way and that's a strong suit, and we can see how resilient that system of beliefs is. Nobody has been to this day capable of corrupting this system or stopping it from existing. So Of course, it's a trade-off. You can't scale this into like a world religion, but it's a system that just works on a large scale, but not a universal scale.
Yeah.
But I don't even think that something like the Catholic system could work on a universal stage, because then it just becomes too powerful. Yeah, but I think that there's precedent for like completely this informal governance.
Yeah. Oh gosh, this is like there's a lot to unpack.
We're too deep. I know.
No. I love this topic. It's thoroughly interesting. Oh yes, one point that I want to make, like in common law, I think somebody told me this, and I don't think I actually verified it or not, but he was quite knowledgeable, and the way he told me made me believe him. So I suppose don't trust, verify. But I will say what he said. He said that apparently, like if there's amendments or changes to the common law, or the basic common law, that information is actually transcribed onto some sort of like a leather. And the reason for that is because that's how it was persisted over an extremely long time. So, like, you know, it has outlived pretty much everything in that space. So like, you know, on these like big straps of leather, it has been transcribed onto there. So and apparently it's still this tradition, or this process continues. So, I mean, it's difficult to say about Bitcoin, because Bitcoin's like 12 years old, right? I mean, we need to go through hundreds of years. We need to go through hundreds of years and drawing the best of knowledge and experience that we've already done through decades, a millennia of being humans, and how we persist knowledge throughout the generations should actually be applied to the blockchain. And in some ways, it's kind of like a little bit nerve-wracking, because, you know, at that point we're going to be like petabytes of data, but then, you know,
you can prune. That's one of the things that like makes Monero unusable on a large scale, is that you can't prune the chain. Because Monero, it's impossible to prune, because it's impossible, like, because of its privacy aspects. Like, it's kind of a foot gun, but like point. You can't just like say this is a UTXO, this is a spent UTXO, because nobody knows that, because it's private. So
that's a good point. I didn't think about that. Hey?
The blockchain just grows linearly, if not super. Like, it actually grows faster and faster because, or no, maybe not. They kind of decrease the size of because of the bulletproofs and all the other technology. But still, like it'll always grow linearly. Whereas with Bitcoin, you can prune. This is a good point. In many cases, you can even use Lightning on a pruned node. So,
of course, no, Lightning is going to be such a game changer. You know, I remember reading once somewhere somebody saying that, you know, like setting up a Bitcoin transaction at some point is going to be like the equivalent of contracting out an oil tanker in the current economy. I might be a little bit of you know, I don't know, but you can imagine, like, years from now, you might have these like organizations or institutions which would set up the equivalent of these Lightning networks, and then as light clients, you would, I mean, obviously cypherpunks wouldn't really be interested at this level. You would want to be able to control the Bitcoin yourself, but like, you know, for the average Joe, they would then have a light client to an organization that has quite a number of Lightning channels open to other similar sorts of organizations. And, you know, you can just imagine these Lightning payments just going off in like just unbelievable speed. It's just going to leave every single shitcoin that has ever talked about scalability just in the dust, because you know, there's no consensus at least.
But I wonder that even, like, let's say that Lightning is fully deployed and the base layer is only used to peg in and out. Like, could the entire world work on that system? Like, you need the base layer, and so I'm
not saying we move away from the base layer. I mean, the base layer is always there. you want to keep it that way. But just like you implement a language, right? When you implement a language on top of another language, it's very rare that the base language, or the host language or the implementation language, the features of that language don't translate into the language that you're implementing. You see what I mean? So I foresee that, it's just different layers. It's just different layers, and you reach down into the base layer, and you utilize certain things. Like, for example, I'd like to see Bitcoin. Hypothetically speaking, Bitcoin where it's designed to scaffold up the layer above it. Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like that would be a very good. If Bitcoin was to adapt to something, I would suggest that, or not suggest, I think it would be evolutionarily advantageous to evolve in the direction where it's purely conflict resolution, and it has the struts to prop up the next layer and make it just do that in a decentralized manner. Of course, you don't deviate from the original the cypherpunk primitives of like freedom and self-sovereignty, stuff like that. I mean,
but I still wonder if Bitcoin is completely optimized and it's used in a trustless way without custodians, if the base layer would still, like, if it would be enough for the entire world to operate on it. I'm somewhat dubious. Like, it just the as you said, like, the transactions are so limited that it might not. I don't know if it's possible, but like it's very interesting, and I think that it's not the problem that couldn't be solved.
Yeah, okay, I understand. I see what you mean. You're talking about the proof of work versus other mechanisms that might be out there.
No, I'm talking about the simple, like, block size. Like, let's say that every single person is trying to get on the chain at least once a year, if that's possible.
I see.
But maybe some people know more and there's simulations or whatever. But right now it works, and it doesn't. One of the strong things about Bitcoin is that it doesn't need to, like, win everything to win. Like, it could go back in time to being something worth $1 and, like, only have base layer, and it would still provide lots of utility. Like, it scales that way. I think that there's no reason why Bitcoin needs to, like, become everything. It's enough, even, like, it's a big win, even if it just serves as a money between cypherpunks. That's still cool. Like, that's still something very useful.
No, I think, I totally agree with you. It's cool if it's just money between cypherpunks, but where we're headed now, and this is what, I think that, like, it's going to reach the point where Bitcoin is going to be like this freaking black hole. It's going to suck the value from property. It's going to suck the value from all of these, just, what is traditionally seen as store of values. It's just going to suck it all in. And then you're going to have natural price discovery in property. Like out here in Hong Kong, the property goes for massive, huge, expensive amounts of money. And wouldn't it be wonderful to see, like, natural price discovery out here in Hong Kong, at least in the property markets? I mean, that would be so fantastic to see. Where people are saying, you know what, let me just put my money into Bitcoin instead of buying as many properties as I can to store my value.
It's ridiculous. Like, it's ridiculous that a human need, like shelter, is the go-to store of value. It's maybe the greatest failing of the fiat system is that, like, this basic human need is becoming so inaccessible to a large chunk of people. And I think it's a good thing if people own their own home. That's something that is human. That's something like that makes society stable and better. So yeah, Bitcoin has a lot of benefits. The question is somewhat sometimes if it has too many disadvantages for certain people, that it would they could stop it. But for now, I think that what we like, our mission is not to theorize about these kinds of things, but to build software and businesses and other use cases that utilize this great tool. And everything else is speculation.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I fully understand and appreciate the sort of like, let's fix the let's fix the potholes in the road sort of mentality. Is sort of like, looking at the grand picture of what could be kind of thing. Yeah, there's definitely validity in that. Yeah.
But there's nobody has ever stopped the hostile takeover of a system by figuring out that it is that way and saying it. Like, maybe I need to make myself more clear, but just recognizing that there's an issue and publicizing that is not enough. We need to write code. That's why cypherpunks write code. And
yes.
Just pointing out issues is not going to fix anything. And it's part of this mentality that the state or governments have furthered in people, that all we need to do in order to fix issues is just protest hard enough. And no, actually, at the end of the day, somebody needs to build a business, build a farm, and all this stuff. So I'd like to focus on that. I forgot where this was going, but anyway, the main point here is that building products and software is is the most important thing. And Nix Bitcoin, I think, is actually one of the most freedom preserving ways to use Bitcoin, because it's on your own hardware, it's small scale. Simple people like myself, for example, can read and understand the code. So I wouldn't be, I think that Nix Bitcoin takes an extremely important role. So
Brilliant. Yeah, and I agree with you. And this is the main reason why I want to sort of meet with you, chat with you, get to know you, and maybe other people who are interested in the subject, they can actually go and take this code.
Sorry, maybe you can edit that out, but.
No, yeah, I think we can wrap it up now, dude. It's been really lovely having you on, getting to know you and the project. Really appreciate the time that you've shared with me. And how can people reach out to you if they want to get hold of you?
First of all, also thank you, and I very much enjoyed talking, and I hope that listeners can take some ideas away and a better understanding of Nix Bitcoin. And if people want to contribute, then please come on GitHub. It's Nix-Bitcoin. The project is and the organization is Fort-Nix. So github.com/Fort-Nix/Nix-Bitcoin. And if people want to follow us on Twitter, it's NixBitcoin.org, and emails. I don't know if it's so important, but you can find my email on my GitHub page. And IRC is where discussions happen. So it's free on Freenode. It's the Nix-Bitcoin channel. So I look forward to hearing from everybody. And also, please, if you use the software, give feedback and give bug reports. There's nothing more helpful than that.
Dude, great stuff. Happy hacking, man. I appreciate everything, man.